What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This is episode number 724. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources, and joining me on the line all the way from Denver, Colorado, it's Luis Scott-Vargas. Luis, we got the rare and mythic rare review for Lost Caverns of Ixalan today.
Yeah, we do. And we'll be going through every rare and mythic rare. No bonus sheet this time, though. They're taking one off before we have bonus sheets every single set for the rest of time.
Yeah, so let's get into it. First things first, we want to say thank you to each and every one of our patrons from Patreon that supports us. It's patreon.com/limited resources. If you sign up, you get a thank you card and a sticker in the mail, and you get access to the Patreon feed as well as early views of the content. The live stream, you can watch us record the show live, including me eating a sandwich at breakneck speed right before recording, and a bunch of other super great bonuses there. Again, though, it's really just about supporting the content creators and stuff that you love. And if we're one of them, well, we just wanted to say thank you for supporting us. We really appreciate it. The show is also brought to you by Ultimate Guard. That's right, the best place to get anything supplies related. Luis, you were on the PT regularly, GP circuit, all that stuff for a long time. You know how important it is to have good sleeves.
Definitely. And it's a big part of your Magic playing experience, because at this point, pretty much everyone's sleeves when they're playing. I honestly would play standard unsleeved at these tournaments if they'd let me, but they don't, for good reason. Mm-hmm. Your deck would be marked. And the sleeves you choose really do impact your play experience. Like when I use a pack of great sleeves, like Ultimate Cards Katanas, for example, they're fantastic.
Industry leaders.
I feel good. They shuffle well. They feel good. When you use a pack of sleeves, you know, like the cheapo sleeves that you haven't changed for a while and you're extending their life one too many times, it just is a much worse experience. So definitely got to make sure you've got the right tools for the job, and sleeves from Ultimate Guard, as well as, of course, all their deck boxes and everything else to store, protect, and let you play with your cards. I've had a great time using them.
That's right. Yeah, katanas are the industry standard for sure. Make sure you check them out. You can go to ultimateguard.com. There's a link in the description to check out the products, and then, of course, you can find them at your local game stores or online, wherever it is that you like to shop. Thank you so much, Ultimate Guard, for sponsoring the show. Now, for the rare and mythic rare review, Luis, last week we gave a grade to each card. We'll be doing that again here, but it does play out a little bit differently for the rares and mythics.
Yeah, so the grading scale is the same, but you're going to see a different distribution than normal. So our grading scale goes A through F with 2 subgrades, sideboard and build around. A's was where we'll start with here, with bombs, game winners, cards that are awesome in a ton of different situations, and a ton of rares. The best cards in the set pretty much should be rare. Yeah. That's not always the case. And when it's not, it's actually a little bit rough. When the best card is an uncommon, you see it a lot. But you're going to see a lot of A's here just because that's what rares do. And then you've got B's, cards that actively pull you towards their colors, headliners for a set, and reasons to be in a particular color pair. So there's a lot of B's in here too. So for A's, for example, you've got Gruff Triplets or Virtue of Persistence. For B's, you have cards like Tough Cookie or Werefox Bodyguard. And then there's C's. These are the average playables. They're okay, but they're not the best cards in the set. And most decks have a bunch of them. Rares typically don't fall into C category quite as often because they're either high or low. And the lows are D's and F's. You got D's that are playable, but you'd prefer not to run them. And we're talking cards like Protective Parents or Rhyme for a Reindeer. And then F's are cards that you would never run, cards that cost 1 million mana, cards that refer to Planeswalker, cards like Eerie Interference or Virtue of Knowledge. And rares do tend to have some F's because they're just cards that aren't really for limited, and that's fine. That's just like a natural part of it. The 2 subgrades, there's sideboard, cards that you wouldn't main deck but can be pretty good out of the sideboard, cards like Spider Food. Rares usually aren't sideboard cards either. They're either good or they're not. And then the last category, there are a lot of rares, and it's build around. These are cards that aren't good enough on their own, but you give them the right support, they can be the best card in your deck. Hatching Plans is a good example of a build around card.
That's right. The designers of rares and mythics, well, they get the shackles off a little bit, and they get to push those design areas a little further than you normally get, and that does tend to polarize the grades. All right, let's get into our first card. We're going to be starting with white, just like we did in the commons and uncommons. There's no signpost or anything in rares. So our first card is Warden of the Inner Sky. It is white for a 1/2 human soldier. It is rare. And it says, as long as it has 3 or more counters on it, it has flying and vigilance. Interesting that it doesn't know what type of counters at all. It says tap 3 untapped artifacts and or creatures you control to put a +1/+1 counter on this thing and scry 1 at sorcery speed. So it has the ability to pick up counters on its own by tapping a bunch of stuff, but also you can put counters on it any way you want.
Yeah, this card is actually really good. We were a couple drafts in at this point from between the early access and then also the set released on Arena this morning. And Warden of the Inner Sky, I think, plays really nicely in what a lot of these white decks want to do, which is put a bunch of cheap artifacts and creatures into play, whether that's Tinker's Tote as like one of the best commons for that, or just things like the Outpost, the Oticlon Outpost, the 1-mana artifact that scries 2, preordained, that also comes attached with Sarah Angel. So it's a pretty nice one.
Mm-hmm.
And Warden of the Inner Sky works really well there because once you tap the first three, and it can be one of them, so it can immediately come down and tap itself, you get a 2/2 or 2/3 plus a scry 1, and then you've already kind of gotten paid back. You only spent 1 mana on this card.
That's awesome.
And then if you do that a few more times, all of a sudden you've got a 3/4, 4/5, and then it gets flying and vigilance. So very big fan of Warden of the Inner Sky. I would give it a B, and it's a high priority. It just almost every white deck is going to be able to use this.
This card looks awesome. I like B for Warden of the Inner Sky as well. Next is Fabrication Foundry. It's 1 and a white for an artifact at rare. And it says tap to add white. Spend this mana only to cast an artifact spell or activate the ability of an artifact source. And then it has its own activated ability, which is 2 and a white, tap it, exile 1 or more other artifacts you control with total mana value X. And if you do all of that, you get return target artifact card with mana value X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. And you can only do this at sorcery speed.
So it's a 2-mana rock, but you can only use it on artifacts. And then it also lets you cash in artifacts in play to get artifacts from your graveyard back. The tricky part about the second ability is you can't sack a token to get a real card back, right, generally. Like a token 0. That's a copy of a card has the same cost and all that. But I mean, like a treasure token isn't really helping you. That said, Tinker's Tote rears its head again. It's not the last time we're going to mention this card. That can get you a 3-drop artifact back at very low cost because you already got most of the value from the tote. But I think Fabrication Foundry is a pretty narrow card. The line I have for Fabrication Foundry is, can you spend the mana easily? If you can, then this card's probably pretty good because if you're playing it and you're happy with it being a mana rock, and then you get to at some point maybe use it to cash in a worse artifact for a better one, that's a totally fine card. If you're playing this for the second ability mainly, well, it's kind of hard for that to be true without the first ability being good. So certainly a build around. I would give it a build around B and just say, if you like the first ability on this card, then this card's probably good enough for your deck.
That's where my focus went as well. Build around B for Fabrication Foundry. Next is Get Lost. It's 1 and a white for an instant at rare. It says destroy target creature, enchantment, or planeswalker, and its controller creates 2 map tokens. And remember, those are artifacts that say 1, tap, sacrifice it to have target creature you control explore at sorcery speed. They always play around with this space, either at the uncommon or rare slot, where it's often a white removal spell like this that will be very strong. Like the text destroy target creature, enchantment, or planeswalker at instant speed for 2 mana is very tempting. But then they will often give that player something back. Usually it's a creature, like a small creature, a 1/1 flyer, 1/1, something like that. But this time it's 2 map tokens. How does that... How much value are we really giving them by giving them the double maps?
You're giving them 2 explorers, which I think is like pretty close to a card in total. I view explorer as like relatively close to half a card, where in most decks it's 40% of a land or 40% of a card because you play about 40% lands, right?
Right.
And then sometimes you're gonna really want to get the +1/+1 counter, and I think overall we're talking about an okay card here in terms of value. You're trading 1 for 1, but they're getting about a card back. But you're getting a pretty good amount of tempo, and the maps take a little time to convert. So yeah, overall, I would say that Get Lost is a pretty good card. I would want this card in my deck
because generally these cards don't play well. Like even if you give them almost anything, Although generally, like I said, it is board presence, not map tokens or, value. But generally speaking, I mean, the numbers do play out over time, right? Like if you give them a 1/1 flyer or a 1/1, I remember that, I don't remember what it's called in the last set, but it was 2 and a white instant kill something and they got a 1/1 and it sucked.
Yeah.
But this one you think is going to be better because of the setup cost on map tokens, basically.
Yeah, I think the setup cost on map tokens is, it's not directly on the board. This will remove a blocker from the board. The Midnight Stroke did not, right? They put a blocker into play. So even though 2 map tokens is, I think, worth a little more than a 1/1, I think the fact that this costs 1 less mana, the fact that it kills well, I guess both these cards killed almost everything. This kills just about everything as well. Mm-hmm. Doesn't kill artifacts is the main thing. And the fact that you can just use it to clear out a blocker means I think Get Lost is probably like a C+ level card.
Okay, that's where I was going to come down as C+ as well. All right, C+ for Get Lost. Don't get super excited. You're giving up something for the flexibility and efficiency of that card. Next is Kellen Daring Traveler. This is 1 and a white for a 2/3 legendary human fairy scout at rare. And it says, whenever Kellen Daring Traveler attacks, reveal the top card of your library. If it's a creature card with mana value 3 or less, put it into your hand. Otherwise, you may put it into your graveyard. Wow, that is a lot already. And this actually has more text as well. So 2 mana, 2/3 with that attack ability, but it's also an adventure and it has Journey On, which is a sorcery adventure for green. And it says create X map tokens, where X is 1 plus the number of opponents who control an artifact. And then it goes on an adventure, and you can still get Kellen Daring Traveler after that. So you get 1 no matter. So it's just green to make a map, and if your opponent has an artifact, you can do green to make 2 maps, and then there's some nod to Commander here or something. But for us, it's just one or the other, and then you get this awesome 2 mana 2/3.
Yeah, I mean
that's
the
great.
green part is not necessary. This card is fantastic without it because it's 2 mana for a 2/3 that attacks, draws you a card some of the time, and at the very least gets you a surveil even if you don't. Like Kellen Daring Traveler is just amazing. If you're playing green, sure, sometimes you'll get a free map token because why not? But for the most part, you're just going to take this card and just cast it, and it's going to be awesome.
Yeah. I like B+ for Kellen Daring Traveler. It just asks so little of you. Yeah, they just have to pay it for 2 mana and you're kind of good to go. You're already generating an advantage.
Yeah, I would say B+ for Kellen too. It's just not a card you're going to pass very often.
Kutziel's Flanker is 2 and a white for a 3/1 Cat Warrior, also at rare. And it says, and it has flash. So 3 mana, 3/1 flash. And when it enters the battlefield, you can choose 1. You got 3 different options. You can put a +1/+1 counter on it for each creature that left the battlefield under your control this turn. Or you can gain 2 life and scry 2. Or you can exile target player's graveyard. Wow. Now, there's a lot there. That kind of something to fit all scenarios, right? The exile a graveyard, you'll know when that counts. Gain 2 life and scry 2 is the default. And then, if you draw it later in the game and you have a big combat where you lost a couple of creatures, you can all of a sudden have a 5/3 at instant speed.
Yeah,
nice.
I mean, this pretty much does everything you want.
Yeah.
For 3 mana. You're mostly going to gain 2 life and scry 2, but a 3 mana that you can play with flash. Like, flash doesn't just mean you get to ambush their creature. It sometimes does. Sometimes they'll attack with the creature and you're happy to trade it. It also just means it throws off combat math. Maybe they're like, do I race my 3/3 against your 1/1, but you have a life total advantage? Yeah, I guess so. And then end of turn, you're like, play the 3/1, attack you for 4. And they're like, wow, I really regret attacking.
Yeah.
The other thing is, you're not going to exile the graveyard that much, but when you do, it's going to be really good. It's going to turn off one of their Fathomless Descent cards, like they played like the Chupacabra. It's going to mess up their plan, whatever their plan they were going for. And then sometimes you trade off 2 creatures and you cast this as a 5/3.
Yeah.
Basically, you get the best of all these worlds because you get to choose whichever one is best at that time. And the baseline of 3/1 flash, gain 2, scry 2 is always option, not situational at all, is good. So I would give a B to Kutziel's Flanker. Very solid card.
Think it's going to make it into the Vintage Cube?
Yes, I made a list of cards I want to put in from this set, and this is on the list.
Yeah.
It's overall too many cards, so I'm not going to put all of them in. But the flanker, I think, just the fact you randomly hate Reanimator, and then you get
the graveyard thing is what made me
also good against aggro. Like in the aggro mirror, a gain 2 scry 2 3-mana 3/1 flash, pretty good.
Yep.
Good with initiative, good at attacking planeswalkers, that sort of thing.
Right. Next is Resplendent Angel. This is Mythic rare. It's 1 white for a 3/3 angel with flying. And at the beginning of each end step, if you gained 5 or more life this turn, you get a 4/4 white angel creature token with flying and vigilance. And you can pay 3 white. And it says until end of turn, Resplendent Angel gets +2/+2 and critically gets lifelink. So it actually meets its own requirement there. This is a reprint. I don't remember what it was from, but I remember this card. And it's excellent.
I think it was one of the core sets, if I recall correctly.
That sounds
but
right.
I could be wrong. Yeah, I mean, it's a 3-mana 3/3 flying that you can just dump 6 mana into to whack them for 5 would already be good enough. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, this also just is like, well, if you end up doing that, you also get a 5-mana angel, or basically a 5 mana worth of angel, 4/4 flying Vigilant Tessera Angel. And like overall, this card is just great because if you ever spend the 6, hit them to gain 5, and then put a 4/4 into play, I assume you're in very good shape that game. It's a 3-mana play that your opponent has to deal with in anticipation of that. So you play this on turn 3 or 4, and then on your turn 5, right before your turn 6, they have to decide, all right, I guess I got to kill this thing because it's just going to come in. That said, if they leave mana up, you might not sink all the mana into this because it can be a bit of a blowout if you do that. But overall, Resplendent Angel looks like an A- to me. It's just like a 3-mana 3/3 flying they have to kill. That's about textbook, bomb.
Agree on A-. Is there a build around component to this? You can gain the life any way you want. It's built into the angel, but like, are there ways for me to gain 5 life in a turn realistically?
Besides this thing?
Right.
Yeah, it's not going to be the easiest. It is possible.
Okay.
There's life linkers. There's stuff like that.
A- for Resplendent Angel. Next is Sanguine Evangelist, which is 2 and a white for a 2/1 vampire cleric at rare with Battle Cry. And just a reminder, Battle Cry says whenever this creature attacks, each other attacking creature gets +1/+0 until end of turn. And it says when it enters the battlefield or dies, you get a 1/1 black bat creature token with flying.
This card is unbelievably good.
That's insane.
Part of the reason this is such a huge bomb, and like I would take it over Resplendent Angel, pick one, pack one. Ooh. If I was offered those 2 cards, is that this card always works. It's 3 mana for a 2/1 plus a 1/1. It attacks as a effectively 4 points of damage with the Battle Cry, more if there's more creatures in play. And then when it dies, you get another 1/1. There's no way for this to exchange poorly.
These are 1/1 flyers too.
Yes, it's always fantastic. So
wow, incredible.
I think that Sanguine Evangelist is the kind of card that you will basically never feel bad about casting. And overall, I would give it an A, just an A. It's just a good card.
It's also easier to cast somehow than the Resplendent Angel.
It is, yes.
It's incredible. All right, A for Sanguine Evangelist. Next is Abuelo's Awakening. This is a weird casting cost. It's X3 and white. And so 4 is your base, and then you need to add X onto that. Sorcery, it's a rare. It says return target artifact or non-aura enchantment card from your graveyard to the battlefield with X additional +1/+1 counters on it. It's a 1/1 spirit creature with flying in addition to its other types. What the heck?
So it's a 4-mana kind of like Zombify, but only for artifacts or enchantments. And it also gives it flying and a bunch of +1/+1 counters, but while setting it to a 1/1 like a 1/1. So even if it's a non-creature artifact, all of a sudden it's now a 1/1 with some counters. I like this card. It's a builder in because you have to have enough targets for it. But the fact that it makes anything, like imagine that you just cast this on something kind of weak, just some trinkety artifact, right? Like you played an equipment and they blew it up. You played the blowgun, not a good card. You spend 6 mana and all of a sudden you have it back as a 3/3 flyer. If it's really sick if you put it on a creature that has a good ability, like on hit ability, because like it's now a flyer. there's a lot of like cool things you can do with it, and it's a late game mana sink where when you have 9 mana out, you get a just massive thing out of the graveyard. I think overall this card is playable if you're reliably going to have targets, but it's not an exciting card. It's like a build around C. It's just like an okay card.
Okay. And if you put it, so you're saying if you put it on like an artifact creature, it'll reduce that down to a 1/1 and then add the counters back.
Yeah, and a good of it flying, so it's at least a flyer. It's not a Mondo combo with a creature though. It's not like you get a 7/7 off your 5/5 or whatever.
Okay, what grade do you want to give the Awakening? A build around?
I would give it a build around C. It's a playable card if you have the targets, but these cards already run the risk of not having a target, and this card is like even more extreme. So you got to have those cards.
Okay, next is 1,000 Moons Smithy, which is 2 white for a rare legendary artifact, and it says when it enters the battlefield, create a white gnome soldier artifact creature token with this creature's power and toughness are each equal to the number of artifacts and or creatures you control. And it says at the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, you may tap 5 untapped artifacts and or creatures you control. If you do, you transform it into Barracks of the Thousand, which is a legendary artifact land that taps for white, and it says whenever you cast an artifact or creature spell using mana produced by Barracks of the Thousand, create a white gnome soldier artifact creature token with this creature's power and toughness are each equal number of artifacts and or creatures you control.
So you start out by spending 4 mana to get an XX, which is already a 2/2 because it counts itself and it counts 1,000 Moons Smithy, and is going to be bigger for every artifact or creature you control. So that's not that hard to end up doing. And then if you're able to flip this, all of a sudden you end up with like a steady stream of those, which sounds pretty incredible to me.
And they grow off of each other, etc. So how does this, at the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, so your first main phase, does this trigger?
Yeah.
And so basically ask you if you want to tap the things? So
what you can't do with this is play it and flip it in the same turn.
Okay.
Barring something really weird happens.
Like playing it during your upkeep or something. Yeah.
Like, so what you do is you cast this, and then you pass the turn, and then on your next turn you can tap down like your whole board to
flip it.
To flip this. And if you can avoid tapping this, it will be untapped, and then you can tap this and cast something cheap with it and immediately get like a 7/7 or 8/8.
It doesn't need to be cheap either.
Well, you're tapping already 5 things. So,
but they're not lands.
Yeah, they're not lands though. No, it's true.
Interesting. This card seems sweet to me.
Yeah, I think this card's really good.
Yeah, because, one way to think about these, right, for us vintage cube aficionados, right, is that it's making the golems that like Urza makes and stuff. It's just they're even better because they count creatures.
Better, yeah.
Right. And we know those are very powerful.
Yeah.
And they feed off of each other too. So this thing just seems like an army in a can. I mean, I think you're just going to end up spitting out a huge board state off of this thing. What goes wrong here?
Well, what goes wrong is if you don't have very much stuff in play and you cast this, let's say you have one other creature in play and you cast this as effectively a 2/2.
Or
like
3/3.
Maybe it'll be a 3/3 once it's all said and done. You spent 4 mana for a 3/3 and you can't flip it, and then they kill something and it just doesn't do that much.
I see. Okay. Yeah, that's not that bad of a downside. Yeah, that sounds fine.
Kind of the fail case, but
I like B+ for 1,000 Moons Smithy.
Same. It is a build around in the sense that you want a lot of artifacts and creatures, but it's not so costly a build around that I wouldn't say you could just put this card in almost any white deck, and I assume it would be pretty good.
Yeah, same. Cool card. Next is Unstable Glyph Bridge, which is 3 white for an artifact at rare. And it says, when it enters the battlefield, if you cast it, for each player, choose a creature with power 2 or less that player controls. Then destroy all creatures except creatures chosen this way. And then this thing actually has craft with an artifact for 3 white. And if you do craft it, it transforms into Sand Swirl Wanderglyph, which is an artifact creature golem. It's a 5/3 flying that says whenever an opponent casts a spell during their turn, they can't attack you or planeswalkers you control this turn. And each opponent who attacked you or a planeswalker you control this turn can't cast spells. So it kind of sets a line in the sand on, do you want to cast stuff and then attack because you can't, or you can attack but then you can't cast stuff?
Yeah. But mostly it's like, how good is the front side? Well, you get to choose, which is nice. Mm-hmm. So you choose, basically you reduce them down to whatever their worst small creature is. Mm-hmm. And you get to reduce yourself down to whatever your best small creature is. Okay. But maybe you don't even have anything to play. Mm-hmm. And then you blow up the rest. It doesn't blow up artifacts. It just blows up creatures. And then you get to spend an additional 5 mana to make it a 5/3 flyer. That's pretty annoying. Like, really, you have to decide between attacking and casting spells.
That is a lot. That's very annoying. How close is this to a Wrath for the front side of Unstable Glyph Bridge? Is it close enough for you?
Very close. Yeah. Okay. I would say this counts as a Wrath.
Then it's awesome.
Like, whatever their board is, reducing them down to a very small amount of it seems fine. Like, they're down to 1 creature and it's a 2-power creature at best.
Yeah. No, that's great. Dude, and then it gives you a win condition built in and you just need to, spend some mana and figure out how to craft it. That seems great.
Yep. And then, like, just Wrath as an extra card, it sounds like a pretty good deal,
Yeah, I would start off very high on this. Any of these Wraths, even if they get up into the 5 or 6 mana range that leave you some way, there was the one that left you the incubator token, things like that just leave behind some really significant board piece tend to perform really well. And I would start off there. I would give Unstable Glyph Bridge like an A and then just figure it out from there.
Yeah, I like A- for it, but yeah, it's fine either way. Okay. It's pretty great. Like, just getting a Wrath with significant upside. Like, how different is this from Sunfall? It's worse. Sunfall is like one of the best cards ever. But this
is it worse?
It is worse.
Okay,
but
I wonder if it is. But
well, I mean, there's situations where it's not. But like, overall, I would always take Sunfall over this card. But
really,
this still puts them down to just 1 thing, and you get to keep whatever the best of your small things are. And you get a 5/3 that's an annoying ability for 5 more mana. I think the difference is Sunfall for 2 more mana, you get like a 7/7. So it's pretty hard to compete with that. But this card just looks awesome.
That was the card I was thinking of, right?
Yeah, it's the closest.
That leaves the incubator. Okay, yeah. So yeah, agreed. Yeah, I was thinking of a different card. Yeah, I'm with you. It's better than this, but this is like right in the same wheelhouse.
But Sunfall is the best Wrath we've ever had in Limited.
Right. This is like at least somewhere in that range. The only ways I think it could be bad are if it ends up being that a lot of non-creature things being left behind ends up being really punishing for some reason. But we'll see. Our last white card is Osier Talk, Deepest Foundation. This is 4 white for a 6/6 legendary creature god. It is mythic rare. It has vigilance. So 6 mana, 6/6 vigilance. It says if 1 or more creature tokens would be created under your control, 3 times that many of those tokens are created instead. And when it dies, return it to the battlefield tapped and transformed under its owner's control. It becomes Temple of Civilization, which is a land that taps for white, and you can pay 2 and a white and tap it to transform Temple of Civilization, which will put it back to the creature. But it says you can activate it only if you attacked with 3 or more creatures this turn, and only as a sorcery. Triple tokens now.
So
I guess the question for us is, do we care about what if I just took the token text off?
It wouldn't be that different. Like, it would be worse. I mean, this card does some cool stuff, but I think that mostly it's like, am I going to spend 6 mana on a card that's just a 6/6 vigilance, nothing else at this time, right? And hope they don't kill it or bounce it. And then if I untap and make a token, I definitely win the game. If you make even 1 token, you get 3. Yeah. It's going to be pretty hard to imagine really losing that game.
Creature tokens, yeah.
Yes, but you're still in a spot where you spent a 6 mana card and then untapped with it. And that's just not going to happen that often.
Yeah.
The other thing is, like, when it dies, you get a land, which is pretty hard to flip back. You have to attack with 3 creatures. And once you're at 6 mana, the extra land doesn't help. I think that all the 5 mana ones are so much better than this. But this one is still, I think, a playable card. It's if do you want a 6 mana card in your deck. It's a decent one. Getting the rebate of a land plus also the ability to flip it back seems totally fine to me.
Yeah. Worth noting that you do have to tap the Temple of Civilization to transform it, so it would come back tapped, or does it leave the battlefield and come back? That's kind of the question.
No, it'll be tapped. So
okay.
So you're gonna attack with 3 things, spend 4 mana effectively, and flip into a tap 6/6. But maybe on that turn you could also cast a token making spell and make 3 1/1 tokens to block or something.
Yeah, it's just tough because you are full on shields down if you had to ship with 3 things too. And then what are you putting in for the build around part of it with the creature tokens? Is that just a throw in?
It's not like completely a throw in, but it's also like kind of a throw in. Like it's kind of.
You're not going to bump it up a grade because of that.
Yeah, I think that most of the challenge with this is just I got up to a 6 mana spell and then it untapped. Like, how different is this? Honestly, how different is this than casting Colossal Dreadmaw? 6 mana, 6/6.
That's what I kept thinking, is comparing it to like a common 6-drop.
This is kind of like a C+. Like,
okay,
there will be some matchups where you play this and they just like, wow, I have a hard time killing a 6/6, or I'm a slow deck, I kill your 6/6, it comes back as a land. It's still pretty annoying to me. But yeah, it's just not that good. So I would give Ozure Talk probably a C+.
C+, and then I would give it an A build around. Like, if you're making tokens, you're not going to lose. Like you said, even if it's just make a 1/1 token, all of a sudden you have 3. All right, that's it for white. That brings us to blue. Our first card is called the Enigma Jewel. This is blue for a legendary artifact, and we get a mythic right off the bat. It enters the battlefield tapped, and it taps for 2 colorless mana, but you can only spend the mana to activate abilities. And then it also has the activated ability, craft with 4 or more non-land cards with activated abilities. And the craft cost is 8 and a blue. Hello. And it becomes, I guess it's really like -2 to that. Is that?
Yeah, it can pay for 2 of that.
Okay. Wow. And then it turns into Locus of Enlightenment, which is a legendary artifact. It says it has each activated ability of the exiled cards used to craft it. You may activate each of those abilities only once each turn. And whenever you activate an ability that isn't a mana ability, copy it, and you can choose new targets for the copy. This card just gives me a headache. Yeah,
this card's an F. It's just, I guess the one argument I have for this is that you could construct a deck where a 1 mana artifact that taps for 2 mana just for activated abilities. You care about an artifact, you want cheap artifacts, and you have tons of activated abilities. Maybe this is like a really bad Omen Hawker from Mom, the 1 mana 1/1 that tapped.
That was really good. Yeah.
The Soul Ring.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think for the most part, I would be inclined to just not put this card in my deck.
Okay, F for Enigma Jewel. Next is Deep Root Pilgrimage, which is 1 and a blue for an enchantment at rare. It says whenever 1 or more non-token merfolk you control become tapped, you get a 1/1 blue merfolk creature token with hexproof. So we have a pure build around here. Yeah. Is it worth it?
I think it is.
Like, if I had 10 merfolk,
I think if you had
out
7 or 6 merfolk, I would put this card in my deck.
Yeah. You don't have to get too many.
Once you get 1, it's pretty good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Hexproof on a 1/1's kind of whatever, but I guess.
Yeah, that's whatever. But like 2 mana to get 1 immediately and then have the like hope of getting more. And this can get out of control quickly. I know this doesn't make more of itself, but if you're getting to attack every turn, this can be pretty good. I mean, also, like, imagine you're on the draw and they go turn 1/1, the C-Note Scout into this. Like, you're just going to lose badly. Like, this looks like a build around B. Yeah. I think you could probably take this early and try to build around it, or maybe kind of lean towards, if I open this late, you do something good with it.
Okay, I like that. The two gotchas on it are the one that Luis mentioned, which is that the tokens don't trigger the Deeproot Pilgrimage themselves. They have to be non-token merfolk. And also that it's one or more, so you don't get one per tapped merfolk. It's whenever, basically on combat, if you attack with 4 merfolk, you get one.
If you're attacking with Merfolk, this is a Merfolk Bitter Blossom, which is kind of nice.
Yeah, kind of cool. All right, next is Malcolm, Alluring Scoundrel. This is 1 and a blue for a 2/1 legendary Siren Pirate at rare. It's got flash and flying, and whenever Malcolm, Alluring Scoundrel deals combat damage to a player, put a chorus counter on it. It says draw a card, then discard a card. If there are 4 or more chorus counters on Malcolm, you may cast the discarded card without paying its mana cost.
I mean, I was sold at 2/1 flash flying.
Yeah.
And then the fact that it's also a looter when it hits them is great. And then somehow if you hit them 4 times, you just win the game. You just get to discard a card into play. You get cast it for free instead.
Yeah, it's all upside. I mean, it's a little bit weirdly worded, but it's everything about this card is good. Yeah. It's also quite easy to hit with it.
Yeah, because first of all, it has flash, so they don't know it's coming in. It's got flying, so it's just really hard for them to.
Yeah, and it's only 2 mana, so you can get it down before many other flyers would even hit the battlefield.
Yeah, I like A- on Malcolm.
Me too.
Just a fantastic card.
Yeah, that's the type of card that the longer it stays on the battlefield, your opponent's win percentage just starts dumping off. Next is Subterranean Schooner. That artwork is great, by the way. Maybe I just like these ship artworks. It's 1 and a blue. For a 3/4 vehicle, it's rare, and the crew cost is 1. They're pretty aggressive about these crew costs these days. I think they know that if they're going to put a vehicle into a set, it needs to be very usable. And this one it says whenever it attacks, target creature that crewed it this turn explores.
We're talking Smuggler's Copter here.
Can I crew with, I can over crew, right?
Like you can tap a bunch of creatures.
Can I do that?
Yes, but it only lets one of the creatures explore.
Oh.
So yes, you can do that, but it's the sort of thing where there's no real reason to do that on this card.
I see. So I have to target one of my creatures.
Yeah, you target one of them.
Okay, I see. Gotcha. All right. But this is awesome. 2 mana, 3/4 crew 1. And then the thing that crewed, usually just the one thing that crewed it, gets to just explore while it's slamming?
I mean, I wasn't joking when I call it Smuggler's Copter. It's 2 mana for a 3/4, and then you're getting half a card out of it, which is kind of like looting.
Yeah.
I think Subterranean Schooner is awesome, and it's an artifact, which is a general upside.
Yes.
So I would give the Schooner an A. I think you're just going to be really happy with this card.
Okay, I'll go A- on the Schooner.
Sure, A- is fine. But think about it this way. Your opponent's on the play, goes island, play this. Do you think you're winning that game? It feels like you're losing that game.
You're
pretty
taking
badly.
a lot of damage, and they're definitely building out their board. Next is Akal, First Among Equals. Akal. It's 2 and a blue for a 1/5 legendary human advisor. This one is rare. It says at the beginning of each player's end step, if an artifact enters the battlefield under your control this turn, look at the top 2 cards of your library, put one of them into your hand and the other in your graveyard. Holy smokes.
Yeah, there's no equals here. Akal is just awesome.
I was going to say, it should just say Akal first.
I mean, 3 mana for awesome. A 1/5 is really hard to kill and is a great blocker. Mm-hmm. And then it effectively draws you a card every single turn. It isn't optional, so you could in a late game be in a spot where if you play an artifact, you get milled for 2.
Oh, we can dream.
But that's not really
that's a good way to go, man. You got to go out doing what you love,
I would give this one an A- too. I mean, this one just it's a card draw machine that costs 0 mana to use. You do have to be playing artifacts, but that's just not that hard. And has great stats, so there's nothing to hate here. And I wouldn't even call it a build around because any blue deck could probably play this card.
Okay, it does get better if you put a little effort into it. Of course, if you get it
early, you will play a bunch of artifacts.
Yeah. Now, what are the situations where I have an artifact enter the battlefield under my control during my opponent's turn? Because that would trigger.
Just an artifact with flash. You play like a Lodestone Needle or something like that.
Okay. Yeah. Wow. Really nice. Next is Braided Net. This is 2 and a blue for an artifact. It's rare. It enters the battlefield with 3 net counters on it, and you can tap and remove a net counter from it To tap another target non-land permanent, its activated abilities can't be activated as long as it remains tapped. I guess that's just this turn or something. And then you can craft with an artifact for 1 and a blue to turn it into braided quipu. Is that how you'd say that?
Yeah, I think so.
Quipu. And it's 3 and a blue, tap it, draw a card for each artifact you control, then put braided quipu into its owner's library, 3rd from the top.
So I think this card is incredibly good because it's a 3-mana artifact that immediately you can just tap it to like lock down their stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And most of the time, this is going to do a pretty good job stabilizing for you.
Definitely.
It's going to be hard to imagine that's not the case.
Because you can do it right away and it doesn't require extra mana.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then you tap down their thing. It also even removes activated abilities, though I don't know how often that's really going to come up. And then once you've done that for a while, once it flips, all of a sudden you have a card draw spell, which is the perfect thing to pair with you. You're down a card when you play the net, but you get tempo because a 3-mana card that gets to tap to tap down a creature. And note that it doesn't lock down the creature, it just taps it once. But this stabilizes the board really nicely because let's say you're on the back foot. You play this, you tap their biggest attacker. Next turn, you play something else. You still tap their biggest attacker, which might be the next card they played, but you're kind of keeping up with them. You are eventually down a card, but then once you craft it, you can then draw 3 or 4 cards off of it. So you kind of get all that card back plus interest. And then once you've drawn 3 or 4 cards, you know it's a great card to draw. This thing.
Because now you're just right back in business. That is sweet. What a cool design, too.
Yeah, I think this card is very cool, and I think it's very strong.
Do you think it's a B+?
I think it's a B+, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, see, this is a cool design space that you can get into with rares. Like, this would be too much for an uncommon, you know. That's really cool. B+ for Braided Net. Next is Kite Sail Larcenist, which is 2 and a blue for a 2/3 human pirate at rare. It's got flying and ward 1. And when it enters the battlefield, for each player, choose up to 1 other target artifact or creature that player controls. For as long as Kite Sail Larcenist remains on the battlefield, the chosen permanents become treasure artifacts with tap, sacrifice this artifact to add 1 mana of any color, and they lose all other abilities.
So you get to treasurify a thing for each player.
Okay.
So that means you lock down their biggest creature, like you minimus containment their biggest creature or artifact.
Yes.
Turn it into a treasure that's really just not, particularly great. And then for you, if you want, you can turn a crappy token. Like if you have a Tinker's Tote you don't care about or a 1/1 token and you need a treasure, you can just do that. That's
cool. And that's for as long as this thing's around.
Right. So they have to kill this to get their thing back. And then also it's a 2/3 flying ward 1, which is pretty hard to deal with.
It is. Nice toughness, and the ward 1 on a 3-drop is a good timing for that. Yeah, Kite Sail Larcenist seems very strong, really annoying. It's also up to, right, on both of them. So like you could just treasure their thing and not treasure anything on your side.
You're not forced to do anything you don't want to do, basically.
Well, I like it. I like B+ for Kite Sail Larcenist as well.
Yeah. I would actually trend towards A- on this. 3 mana for a 2/3 flying ward 1 is pretty burly. It locks down their biggest thing. It's like a flying banisher priest. Yeah. And then it has a little bit of more play to it here and there,
Yeah, and banisher priest, a card, it doesn't have ward 1. Like that's very annoying. All right. Yeah, B+ trending towards A- for Kite Sail Larcenist. Next is the Ever-Flowing Well, which is 2 and a blue. For a legendary artifact, it's a rare. And when it enters the battlefield, you mill 2 cards, then draw 2 cards. And it has Descend 8, which I don't think made it onto any of the commons or uncommons, right? They were all 4. So this one says, at the beginning of your upkeep, if there are 8 or more permanent cards in your graveyard, you transform the well into the Myriad Pools, which is a legendary artifact land that taps for blue. And it says whenever you cast a permanent spell using mana produced by the Myriad Pools, up to 1 other target permanent you control becomes a copy of that spell until end of turn.
It's a lot of text for a divination, because that's what it is, right, when it starts. It's a divination that leaves an artifact in play and mills you for 2. Both of those are upsides in this set.
Yes.
And then eventually it'll flip into an island that lets you cast a permanent and turn one of your like bad permanents into that for a little bit. So like you cast a 4/4 and you make a treasure token into a 4/4 and attack them for 4. It's a lot of words to have, I think, kind of a minor payoff in the grand scheme of things, but it's also a divination with multiple upsides. I would be surprised if like blue-black, for example, didn't always run Everflowing Well as a divination that helps stock their graveyard. And then eventually turn into an island or something that actually does something decent too.
Mm-hmm. Man, I like the floor on this thing, and the ceiling I'll take.
Yeah.
What do you want to give it?
I would probably give it a C plus.
Mm-hmm.
I think the way I look at this card is, does your deck want divination? Because if the answer is no, my question. Deck doesn't want divination, then this card's probably not going to do it for you. But decks that want divination, I think, will be pretty happy with this.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, dude. When I see Descend 8, I'm just like, it might just say LOL afterwards, because like,
I actually think Descend 8 is playable in this format.
Okay,
it's not easy, but I've seen some blue-black decks that can really go hard on self-mill and are actually playing above 40 cards to enable.
Yeah, I guess I'm just saying, like, it might say something really cool after Descend 8, but like even in a deck that's dedicated to it, it won't come up all the time. And that's a dedicated
but it
deck.
does matter. Like if this card said Descend 8, it flips into a 5/5 flyer, I would say this card is quite a bit better.
Okay.
Like that does change things for me. But yes, in this particular case, I don't think that Everflowing Well is going to flip in just win you the game or whatever. But I think it's just a divination with upside that also helps your other stuff kind of get enabled too.
Okay. Next is Tishana's Tidebinder. This is 2 and a blue for a 3/2 Merfolk Wizard at rare. It's got flash. And when it enters the battlefield, counter up to 1 target activated or triggered ability. If an ability of an artifact, creature, or planeswalker is countered this way, that permanent loses all abilities for as long as Tishana's Tidebinder remains on the battlefield. And it does remind you that mana abilities can't be targeted.
So 3-mana 3/2 flash is like slightly below the curve still.
Yeah, it's just whatever.
I'm not doing that just by itself. But counter up an activated or triggered ability, that's pretty good. Like you get to have some good play out based on that. Like there's a lot that you can counter that does matter.
I guess Explore would be the most common.
Yeah,
target.
but even just activating Craft, is this sort of thing.
Yeah.
And it also locks down the creature or the permanent from using those abilities the rest of the time that this is in play. I don't know how much that's really going to matter, but it does do something.
C plus.
I would probably give it a C plus. Look, when this card's in your hand, I think you're going to have some good effects from it.
Yeah, it does. It seems like a card that if I was in blue, I would never cut.
Yeah, you're never cutting this card.
Yeah, just never prioritize it. Last blue card is Ojer Patik, Deepest Epoch. It's 2 blue for a 4/3 legendary creature god. It's a mythic rare. It has flying. So 4 mana 4/3 flyer. And whenever you cast an instant spell from your hand, it gains Rebound. And if you don't know what that is, it says exile as it resolves. At the beginning of your next upkeep, you may cast it from exile without paying its mana cost. And then it says, when this thing dies, return it to the battlefield tapped and transformed under its owner's control with 3 time counters on it. And it becomes Temple of Cyclical Time, which is a land that taps for blue. And it says, remove a time counter from Temple of Cyclical Time, that when you tap it for blue. And then you can also pay 2 and a blue and tap it to transform it. But you can only do it if there's no time counters left on it, and only at sorcery speed.
So you get a 4-mana 4/4 flying, and you immediately can just cast an instant and get it Rebound if you have enough mana. Also, it's a 4-mana 4/4 flying that dies into an island.
4/3 flying, yeah.
Oh, sorry, 4/3.
Yeah,
and
unreal.
Eventually comes back, and it's the ability that takes the longest to come back if you don't have you can't just immediately flip it back. Whereas a lot of the other ones, the next turn, if you met the conditions, this you can basically never do that. But it's the easiest. It doesn't ask you to do anything. You just tap your land, and then it eventually comes back.
Awesome.
Incredible card. It's also
Just
cheap enough that I
super
can just see the ability being good.
Totally. The rebound thing and the other stuff. Yeah, all of it's good. I like A for Ojer Pekpatik.
Yeah. Easy A.
Easy A. That moves us to black. Our first card is Stalactite Stalker. Looks like a gremlin. This is black for a 1/1 Goblin Rogue. It's rare, and it has Menace. So you get a 1/1 Menace for 1. And it says at the beginning of your end step, if you descended this turn, put a +1/+1 counter on it. And you can pay 2 and a black and sacrifice it to give target creature -X/-X until end of turn, where X is its power. Woo! That's a potent little package right there.
I mean, you get a lot for 1 mana. For 1 mana, you get a 1/1 Menacer that you'll hit them a few times with, and it'll grow over time. And then eventually you could sack it to just nug something if you really wanted to.
Yeah. And you can do that whenever you want. There's no timing restriction on it. You can just do it for 1. But of course, you're hoping it gets to be a bit bigger. I like B for Stalactite Stalker. I just like a 1-drop that's this relevant doesn't come along that often. And this thing just seems like it's got build around potential. It's good enough on its own.
Yeah, it doesn't ask much of you. Obviously, It's better if your deck can do that thing, but I think that this card is just great regardless. So I would give
Go ahead.
I would give it a B as well.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on to Souls of the Lost, which is 1 and a black for a rare spirit with power star, toughness star +1. And it says, as an additional cost to cast this spell, discard a card or sacrifice a permanent. And then it has Fathomless Descent, which is the scaling descent that says its power is equal to the number of permanent cards in your graveyard, and toughness is that number +1.
So you play this, and it almost always is naturally going to buff itself 1 based on you discarding or sacrificing. But mostly it's just going to be like a cheap, relatively large creature at a real cost. But I think this card would be, I think, pretty decent.
Really? I feel like the cards that make you get rid of, can you combo something? Like, can you discard something that you really wanted in the yard anyway, or something weird?
Yeah, well, you can discard a card for Descent if you want. That totally works. Man,
I think the problem I have with it is just like, what is my payoff? It's just a kind of dumb, medium-sized creature. Like maybe I get a 3/4 or a 4/5 at some point.
I think in a blue-black deck, I bet this card's going to be like a 5/6 really easy.
Man, you must have played some blue-black and seen that there's a turbo mill or something, because
there is. The blue-black deck has a bunch of ways to mill itself, and it goes pretty hard. Like, look, this is a card I bet in like white-black or something. You're just not going to play this. It's going to be a 2/3 too much of the time, maybe a 3/4. In blue-black or green-black that actually is doing the thing, you can end up with this as like an 8/9. I don't think that would be that hard, and that card's so good.
It's not that good.
A 2-mana 8/9, yeah, that is good.
But you have to discard a card or sacrifice a permanent. Like,
yeah, it's
a
cost.
Free. Like, that costs a lot. Like,
it can, but I think that I would view this card as like a build around B, where if you're really going after the Descent stuff, this is exactly the kind of card you want.
Okay, build around B for Souls of the Lost.
I'm not saying just put this in your deck and hope it works out.
Okay, I gotcha. Yeah, because I like the stats if it's that good, Next is Tarian's Journal, which is 1 and a black for a legendary artifact at rare. And it says, tap it, sacrifice another artifact or creature to draw a card at sorcery speed, or you can pay 2, tap it, and discard your hand to transform it into the Tomb of Aklazats, which is a legendary land cave that taps for black. And it says, and it also has the activated ability tap. You may cast a creature spell from your graveyard this turn. If you do, it enters the battlefield with a finality counter on it, and it is a vampire in addition to its other types.
This card's awesome. It's a builder around as well, but this is like a builder on A. Look, you don't get map tokens for free. I think that we maybe overestimated a little how often that would come up, but you get treasures and fungus and stuff like that at a pretty cheap cost. If you want to put a bunch of like trinkets into play, this is the set for that. And Tarian's Journal is just such a good payoff where you're like, sacking to cards that or like permanents that cost you less than a card in total. You're sacking to draw a card, already an advantage there, and then eventually you can just flip this into a swamp that lets you just tap to cast spells from your graveyard.
Yeah. So what's the play pattern like? Because it does work against itself on the front end.
Yes.
Right. So what is it? Are you trying to like empty out your entire hand and then transform it? Or is it like, well, I've got a creature in my hand, but I'm just going to get it back anyway, so screw it?
It's very context dependent. My guess is the front side's powerful enough that you're not going to flip it you're not like trying to turbo flip it.
Okay.
You're just, what you'll do is you'll play this and you'll use it until you kind of run out of stuff to do. And if you eventually do, then you could consider flipping it.
Okay. That makes sense. What do you want to give Tarian's Journal? Is it a B?
I would say it's a B, but you can build around and make it an A. Like, so it's kind of somewhere in the space between. Like, it's clearly a build around in the sense that you can't just play this like in a blue-black 5 creature descent deck and expect it to be good. But I would say the average black deck could probably make use of this, and the decks designed to optimize it will make it close to an A. But I would just give Tarian's Journal a B and just know this is the thing you're trying to get towards.
Okay. I like that card too. That's a cool one. Corpses of the Lost is 2 and a black for an enchantment at rare. It says skeletons you control get +1/+0 and have haste. And when Corpses of the Lost enters the battlefield, create a 2/2 black skeleton pirate creature token. And at the beginning of your end step, if you descended this turn, you may pay 1 life. If you do, return Corpses of the Lost to its owner's hand.
I mean, how much more do you need to make a 3-mana 3/2 haste playable? The answer is not that much. A 3-mana 3/2 haste is like borderline playable, just like as is. And this is a 3-mana 3/2 haste that leaves an enchantment on the battlefield for whatever purposes you want. Pumps your other skeletons, which is not like something that's going to come up all that often. But most importantly, at some point in the game, just offers you the ability to pay another 3 mana to get another 3/2 haste at the cost of 1 life.
That is fantastic.
That's great. Corpses of the Lost, B+ for me. Just a fantastic card. Don't have to do any work to make this worth it. But of course, when you do, it gets a little better.
Yeah, this seems like an extremely annoying card too. Next is Preacher of the Schism, which is 2 and a black for a 2/4 vampire cleric at rare. It's got Death Touch. Oh man, a 2/4 Death Touch. That's just a bear in combat. Whenever it attacks the player with the most life or tied for the most life, you get a 1/1 white vampire creature token with lifelink. And whenever it attacks while you have the most life or are tied for the most life, you draw a card and lose a life? Oh my God. I was kind of waiting for the downside on this guy, but
this card pays you no matter what. So it's a 3-mana 2/4 Death Touch, really hard to beat in combat.
Yeah.
And then when it attacks, you either get a 1/1 lifelinker or you get to pay a life for a card. And they kind of line up to what you want at that point in time. Mostly you'd really just want a 1/1 lifelinker because getting a 0-mana 1/1 lifelink is generally better than drawing a card, even especially at the cost of 1 life. But you're happy either way. And this card is unbelievable. This is another card a lot like Sanguine Evangelist, the white 2/1 with Battlecry, where it asks absolutely nothing of you. You tap 3 mana, you cast it, and it's great. So Preacher gets like an A- for me of just like,
me too.
I don't care what my deck's doing. This is going to be one of the best cards in it. Those cards that are so clean, cheap, simple, they always get high grades because you just never go wrong with them. It's not even like a 5-mana 5/5 flyer that like sometimes you don't get to that point in the game really, or you play it and they do something. This costs 3 mana.
Yeah,
you just cast it and you got a significant advantage the rest of that game. So
yeah, I'd give Preacher an A.
Just an A is fine.
Yeah, because we give it based on efficiency. Right? Yeah, sure.
This is super efficient.
Does that. So, wow, incredible card. Next is Bloodletter of Ixalan. This is 1 black, black, black. So 4 mana with 3 of them being black for a 2/4 flying vampire demon. This one's mythic. And it says if an opponent would lose life during your turn, they lose twice that much life instead.
Great card, great ability. The obvious caveat is it costs triple black.
Hard to cast, yeah.
I would say this is a kind of a build around A-, where if this costs 3 and a black, we would give this an A-. Like,
yes.
It's a 4 mana, effectively 4/4 flying when it comes to like hitting them, because if they lose life, they lose twice that much. But often you'll play this, they take an extra 3 right away if you have like a 3/2 in play they haven't answered, and then just threatens to do tons of damage. Like, it just kill them so quickly. The problem is you got to be playing like 10, 11 swamps in your deck to have a good shot at casting this, especially on curve. So would I first pick this card over like a good common removal spell? Probably not, because it's triple black. If I was heavy black and I opened this in pack 2, I would take it and try to be as close to mono as I could. Yeah. And then I think it would be a pretty good payoff because it's a very strong card. So I would give Bloodletter of Aclazotz a build around A, where
agreed.
If you can get there, it's just really good.
Yeah, the mana is the only speed bump. Next is Starving Revenant, which is 2 black for a 4/4 spirit horror. It's rare. And when it enters the battlefield, you surveil 2. Then for each card you put on top of your library, you draw a card and lose 3 life. And it has Descend 8 whenever you draw a card. If there are 8 or more permanent cards in your graveyard, target opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life.
So it's kind of funny where you can be in a spot where you cast this in the middle of the game. You don't have Descend 8 yet. You want to keep one of the cards, but if you keep them, you lose it. Like you don't have a choice. Like if the top card is, or the top one of the top 2 is something you want, you actually just have to pay the life. But I mean, you're not always going to just fire off. I'm going to draw 2 cards, lose 6 life.
I'm not.
But drawing 1, losing 3 life, and putting a land on the bottom sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
Putting 2 cards you don't want on the bottom is great. It's a 4 mana 4/4. And then if you can get to Descend 8, it really mitigates the life loss from itself, while also just being like a mini Shieldred, like a half a Shieldred, right? So I think Starving Revenant is awesome. If you play it early enough in the game, you can just work around losing 3 to 6 life and not worrying about it. Like, let's say you're playing against a deck is not really pressuring your life total, or you're just ahead because you went 2, 3, 4 on the play. You can afford to pay the 6 life. You're going to run your opponent over with all those extra cards.
Yeah.
And then sometimes the Descend 8 will pop up, but that's not even that big of a part of a card.
Yeah.
It sounds like a cool card to play with too. I actually like the way this design works out. Like in the middle of the game, you're at 9 life. Like you see 2 cards you want. You're like, well, I can't take both. I guess I'll pay 3 life to take one of them,
Yeah. And that's probably going to be the most common play pattern, is to take 1.
Yeah.
Because just giving up 6 is so much. But yeah, the Descent 8 in the late game, especially in the Turbo Mill deck that you mentioned before, that's legit. It's whenever you draw a card. Like your draw step, you're just draining them. Is it a B+? Is it an A-?
I think it's probably an A-. Like,
I mean, you could get 2 cards out of it. Like,
yeah.
All right, A- for Starving Revenant. What does Terror Tide do?
It's 2 black. It's a sorcery at rare. It has Fathomless Descent. I bet you could guess what this does. All creatures get -X, -X. X is the number of permanents in your graveyard. You knew they were going to do this. They did the Domain Wrath. They do the whatever Wrath.
Yep.
This is the Descend Wrath, and this looks like a builder on A to me. I can't think of many better cards for the blue-black Descend deck where you're just like, I'm going to spend all my time in mana milling myself. You're gonna take that opportunity to try to run me over. Then I'm going to cast this, and it's going to kill your 4 creatures, and I'm going to have a huge advantage in that game. So would I put this in the average black-white deck? Maybe, because you could maybe manage it and have it be a -2/-2 at an opportune time. Yeah. Would I really want this card and first pick it and go into blue-black? Yes, I'd be interested in doing that. And green-black to a lesser degree. So to build around A for Terror Tide, but it's close to a B even without it. Like, yes, red-black aggro probably shouldn't play this card because they just don't want to sweep the board. But it's a pretty effective sweeper, because the time it's worst is if you draw a hand of all lands and cards that do nothing. But if you're playing some creatures and they're killing your creatures and then playing their own, then this does actually help you catch back up.
Funny play pattern with Terror Tide as well. There's the telltale sign that a Wrath is coming when you attack and they go chump, chump, chump. Well, this is like you really go chump, chump, chump.
Really punishing for that. So
do not put
you
more
have 2
stuff
4/4s. They attack you with 2 2/2s, and they have no permanents in their graveyard. That could go a lot of different ways.
Yeah, you might want to take it. So build around A for Terror Tide, and then it does fall off pretty sharply after that. Next is Aclazotz's Deepest Betrayal. This is 3 black for a 4/4 flying lifelink legendary Bat God at Mythic Rare. 4/4 flying lifelink for 5 is already like absolutely must deal with or you lose. But of course, there's more text here. Whenever Aclazotz attacks, each opponent discards a card. For each opponent who can't, you draw a card. And whenever an opponent discards a land card, you get a 1/1 bat creature token with flying. And when Aclazotz dies, return it to the battlefield tapped and transformed under its owner's control. It becomes Temple of the Dead, which is a land that taps for black. And you can pay 2 and a black and tap it to transform Temple of the Dead. Activate only if a player has 1 or fewer cards in hand and only at sorcery speed. Dear God, man. This
so let me tell
insane.
You this. You're going to get one of the, medium cost gods, right? Because they range from like 4 to 6 or whatever. Mm-hmm. So 5. Still cheap enough where if they kill your 5-drop, you don't feel like you immediately lose. Whereas at 6, you always feel like that. And on 4, you basically never feel like that in terms of looking at your mana curve. Uh-huh. And then I'm going to give you the best body for stabilizing. 4/4 flying lifelink. Can block anything in effectively blocks 2 creatures thanks to lifelink.
Right.
And then I'm going to give you the easiest win condition of just attacking with this, because then they're down a card. You either get a bat token if they discarded a land. If they discarded a spell, they're just down a card. You gain 4 life. If they discarded nothing, you draw a card. And then to put the cherry on top, it's got the easiest return condition, which is just spend 4 mana as long as one player has 1 or less card, which is really easy to do if you've gotten to the point where you've played a 5-drop and it's died into a land, which helps you cast your spells. So yeah, maybe you don't flip this the turn after they kill it on turn 6, but if you play this turn 5 and they kill it and it turns into a land, I expect you to be able to flip it on turn 7, because turn 6 you can play just 2 spells or whatever.
Because I can make myself have 1 card? What the heck? I thought it was opponent when I read it. So I can actually control my own destiny with that too. That is just insane. Well, we got an early front runner for best card in the set, no doubt about that.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think that this is very competitive with Bonehorde Dracolich, right? The red one. We're going to get to that. Mm-hmm. Our preview card.
Yep.
That card wins you the game much harder if you untap. Mm-hmm. But this card, you don't have to untap with it to win the game with it. They can kill it and you can win the game a few turns later. So yeah. I would give Aclazotz an A+ because it's got the. Yeah. The lifelink is actually really the thing that takes it over the top.
It is.
This isn't, I'm going to play my big flyer and then you're just going to attack me with 4 creatures and I might die. It just can't really happen with lifelink.
No. You almost can't lose if Aclazotz is on the battlefield and your opponent's trying to kill you.
Right.
Via
I mean,
combat.
yes, sometimes they can bounce it and attack you and then bounce it again and attack you and you're dead or whatever.
Yes,
but
yes.
That's just not something we can grade, as like a huge downside. And this stabilizes in so many situations while also being good against removal. It checks all the boxes.
Unbelievable.
So A+ for Aclazotz. The only deepest betrayal is when I don't open it and my opponent does.
Next card is Queen's Bay Paladin, which is 3 black for a 5/4 Vampire Knight at rare. And when it enters the battlefield or attacks, return up to 1 target vampire card from your graveyard to the battlefield with a finality counter on it. You lose life equal to its mana value.
So it is optional. It's up to 1, which is nice. This thing doesn't just force you to bring back a vampire until you perish. But a 5-mana 5/4 that brings back a vampire, already great. And then if you to attack, you maybe do another one. If you don't have the life for it, then so be it. But assuming that you have a target for this a good amount of the time, not even always, this card would be like a B+. And if you're like black-white vamps and have a good amount of vampires, also, God forbid you have one of the rare vampires.
Right.
Then it's just over. But
could just end the game, yeah.
But just casting this is going to be good. So I think this is a B+ A- level card, depending on how many vampires you have.
And the vampire you get back is untapped as well?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah.
It only comes back once because it dies forever the second time.
Yeah. Wow, that's awesome. Queen's Bay Paladin, B+ to A- depending on your number of vamps. Last black card is called Bringer of the Last Gift. I know what I want. I want an Aclazotz Deepest Betrayal for my last gift. It is 6 black for a 6/6 flying rare vampire demon. It's an 8-drop. It says, whenever Bringer of the Last Gift enters the battlefield, if you cast it, each player sacrifices all other creatures they control. Then each player returns all creature cards from their graveyard that weren't put this way to the battlefield.
Yeah, it's Living Death when
Living
you cast
death
it.
on a body.
Costs 8 mana,
It's 8 mana, man.
but
Like,
this
what
is
am
the
I
kind of
doing?
8 mana that wins you the game. This is like, I mean, this sweeps the board because if you curve into this or like stall the game and cast this, and you haven't killed a bunch of their stuff, then you can play this and kill 4 of their creatures. And maybe they get 1 back, and then hopefully you get a bunch back because you know this is coming and can chump with it. So Living Death, swap all creatures and graveyards and in play is a very powerful card. Getting to plan for it is really good, and then getting a 6/6 flying on top of it. I think this is worth 8 mana. I would consider this a build around because you don't get to 8 mana naturally in a game. But if you're telling me I can pick one, pack one, this, and try to build a deck to utilize it, I bet you could come up with a pretty good deck.
And
I bet I
sealed,
could at least.
and sealed's a thing too, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Man, that 8 mana is tough though. Even if you're building around it, there's times when you don't quite get to that level. What do you want to give Bringer of the Last Gift?
Build around A. Like if you can build the deck that gets to this card, it'll win you the game when you cast it like a very high percentage of the time. You know?
Build
this is
around
what I want out of
meaning
an
play
8-drop.
ramp cards.
Mostly ramp. I mean, you do want ramp stuff. Creatures that you can block with and die are pretty nice with this. Like they double pay you.
Where your creature dies and theirs doesn't.
Yeah, self mill's great too. Like imagine you're just sitting there like when you know you cast 8 mana win the game, you can chump with your 4-drop. You can just do a bunch of stuff to prolong the game, and then you cast this and win. This is what we talk about when we say, hey, an 8 mana card better win you the game.
Yep.
This will do it. Like I bet this card is really good. So
I bet you too. I'm having a little tougher time with the 8 mana.
No, I'm not saying it's easy, but it is doable. And this, I mean, you really prioritize cards that explore to get lands and then treasures and stuff like that. And I think Bringer of the Last Gift will deliver on its promises. So I would give it a build around A. Just you got to make it work, but when it does, it's great. Also, I bet this is one of the best cards to open and sealed.
Yeah, for sure. Next is red. Red. Our first card is called Dire Flail. It is red for an equipment, which is of course an artifact. It's rare. The equip cost is 1, and the creature gets +2/+0. So we've got a little bone splitter action here. Craft with an artifact. It crafts for 3 red, and it becomes Dire Blunderbuss, which is an artifact equipment. It says equipped creature gets +3/+0 and has whenever this creature attacks, you may sacrifice an artifact other than Dire Blunderbuss. When you do, this creature deals damage equal to its power to target creature. And the equip cost on the Dire Blunderbuss is 1.
So you play this in a deck that wants Bone Splitter, which I think the red decks generally do, or at least a lot of them do. Already, it's pretty decent. It gives you a lot of power. Like imagine you played a Tomb Raider, the 1 mana 1/2 into this. You're just attacking for 4 on turn 2, and that's all well and good. And then at some point, ideally when they're tapped out, you have 6 mana. You spend 5 of it to craft with this, 1 to equip, attack, and you throw a treasure at basically what their biggest creature, because at +3/+0, your creature's probably going to take down whatever it hits. And they get hit for a bunch because you have a +3/+0 creature, maybe a 5/2. I think this card's awesome. You do have to have the certain kind of deck that wants the front side and the back side, but the good thing is those are the same deck. Like this card is working not cross purposes. It's actually like really reinforcing what it's doing. I think any aggressive red deck, especially ones with lots of artifacts, will be very happy to have Dire Flail. I think I would just give it a B. It's just a good card.
Yeah. Also kind of interesting that like a blunderbuss is a gun.
Yeah.
Like straight up, it'd be like a musket or something like that. And
you're stacking an artifact. You're loading it with these other artifacts.
Yeah, no, it's cool. It's just they usually don't put guns in.
Yeah.
Next is Inti. How do you say that? Seneschal of the Sun. It's 1 and a red for a 2/2 legendary human knight. This one's rare. It says whenever you attack, you may discard a card. If you do, put a +1/+1 counter on target attacking creature. It gains trample until end of turn. And whenever you discard 1 or more cards, exile the top card of your library. You may play that card until your next end step.
This card's fantastic.
It's just attack with anything, right?
Yeah. So
yikes.
First of all, you could immediately start pumping something else. If you go 1-drop into this, you could just discard a card to get a +1/+1 counter right away if you want. And if you have the mana around or you haven't hit your land drop, discarding a card lets you just take a shot at exiling the top card and getting to play it. So you're not even down a card. It's just straight up looting. So it's basically looting plus a +1/+1 counter whenever you attack.
Trample, yeah.
And it doesn't have to attack itself.
That's incredible.
So I would give Inti probably a B+. I think it can be a little clunky to use because you don't really want to discard a card unless you have the mana to play the card. Maybe you're hoping to hit a land on turn 3, like you're getting kind of aggressive there. Mm-hmm. And you don't get the counter unless you discard the card. So like to make it all work, you have to have a little bit of mana, but it's still just a great card. I think Inti is fantastic.
Super awesome. And interestingly, you may not want to play it on turn 2. You may want to play a more expendable 2-drop than play this and attack. Next is Brass's Tunnel Grinder, which is 2 and a red for a legendary artifact at rare. And it says it enters a battlefield, or when it enters a battlefield, discard any number of cards, then draw that many cards, +1. So it actually pays you back all the way. Mm-hmm. At the beginning of your end step, if you descended this turn, which you probably did, put a boar counter on Brass's Tunnel Grinder. Then if there are 3 or more boar counters on it, remove those counters and transform it. And it transforms into Tekutlan, the Searing Rift, which is a legendary land cave that taps for red. And whenever you cast a permanent spell using the mana produced by it, you discover X, where X is that spell's mana value.
So you're starting out not down a card. You're even on cards because you could play this and immediately draw a card if you don't want to discard anything, though because of the descend you probably do. Mm-hmm. So you're getting a Valakut Awakening on the start. Plus it leaves an artifact in play. You could just play this and then sack it if you wanted to, right? Yep. You do get that extra piece of material. And then if you descend it 3 times, you get a land that probably wins you the game because the next turn you just cast a 4-drop with this, get to discover 4. And if that doesn't stabilize the board, the next turn you get to do it again. It's going to be hard to lose if you're activating or tapping that Tekutlan every turn. Uh-huh. So the real question for me is, how confident are you can descend 3 times? Because if you didn't have the descend part, you wouldn't really play a card that was 3 mana, draw a card, then discard it, and discard as many cards as you want to draw cards, right?
It's sorcery speed as well, yeah.
It's just not good enough. I think that the decks that have a great need of artifacts in play and are working on descend can use this card. I do think that not every deck is going to be able to use this card. I think it looks like a build around C to me, where you really have to want all the components of it and be good at doing that thing. It is a reward, though, if you do.
Yeah, and it is slow. Just as a reminder, it'll check to see if you descended that turn, and then you'll get 1 counter regardless of how many times you descended during the course of the turn. Next is Breach's Eager Pillager. This is 2 and a red for a 3/3 legendary goblin pirate at rare. It's got first strike, so 3 mana, 3/3 first strike, and it says whenever a pirate you control attacks, choose one that hasn't been chosen this turn. You can create a treasure. You can have it target creature can't block this turn, or you can exile the top card of your library and play it this turn. What is the hasn't been chosen this turn part about?
No, because this isn't 1 or more pirates attack. This is whenever a pirate attacks. So if you attack with 3 pirates, you get all 3 abilities.
Gotcha. Okay, that's the trick.
Yeah.
And it is, of course, a pirate itself, but the joke would be to curve into it. Nice. It's a great card.
Yeah.
Wow, that's really good. Especially the middle ability of target creature can't block this turn, because it will allow you to continue to turn this or other pirates sideways for even longer and generate more advantage. Because this is like, you get a mana, they can't block, and you draw a card if you can, do the whole thing.
I mean, just playing this with a pirate in play, you're going to be pretty happy because you're just going to immediately either get a treasure or make it so it can't block. Or if you have a bunch of mana, you can use the exile ability, and it's 3 mana, 3/3 first strike. It already does the thing by itself. Yeah,
and then you get to untap, and because I think if you ever get to start attacking with 2 pirates is where it really gets dumb. Breaches looks like an A to me. I don't know how much you have to build around it. It enables itself, but
absolutely none. Like, I would put this in my deck if I knew I had 0 other pirates as a 3 mana, 3/3 first strike that attacks and makes a treasure, or attacks and draws a card.
Right.
Or can't be blocked, whatever.
This is insane.
Then if you play a 2-drop pirate into this, you just always win.
Yeah, you're just winning a lot. So yeah,
So,
really great.
A for breaches.
Yeah.
I will say that as we look through these rares, they've lowered the average mana cost on a lot of these rares. A lot of these cards are just 3 mana bangers. So
yeah, and they're not even one double red.
Yeah.
Like 2 in a red for an A is like insane. What does Poetic Ingenuity do?
This is 2 in a red for an enchantment at rare. Whenever one or more dinosaurs you control attack, create that many treasure tokens. So you're getting max treasure tokens. It's not limited. Like it's that many. Mm-hmm. And whenever you cast an artifact spell, make a 3/1 red dino. This one is limited to once per turn. So I view this as an artifact build around, because if you're in an artifact deck and you play this, when you play an artifact, you get a 3/1. The card already works. Yeah. And then you also start getting treasures when those 3/1s attack. I wouldn't play this in a dino deck with no artifacts, because then you're playing a kind of bad enchantment that says, hey, when you attack with a dino, get a treasure. It's not really worth a card, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. So artifact build around for Poetic Ingenuity, one of the few non-artifact spells you would probably have in that deck, but man, you can go crazy with this thing.
Yeah, I think that this card looks nuts. So it's a build around A, where I mean, I just kind of feel like my opponent plays this card, I'm going to feel like, oh God, this is going to be tough to deal with. Like Definitely. Your red-white opponents, like play this on turn 3, turn 4, play a 1-drop artifact, make a dinosaur, play another thing. Next turn attack, make a treasure, play an artifact, make another dino. And it just kind of just spirals out of control from there.
Right. I mean, what if they just cast 2 artifacts a turn after you play it? It's just like the board's just flooded. Build around A for Poetic Ingenuity. Next is Ogier Ixalan, Deepest Might. This is 2 red for a 4/4 legendary creature god at Mythic rare. This one has trample. And it says, if a red source you control would deal an amount of non-combat damage less than Ogier Ixalan's power to an opponent, that source deals damage equal to Ogier Ixalan's power instead. God, I cannot believe that the juice is worth the squeeze for that block of text.
Oh, there's one particular point where it really is.
I meant rules text.
Oh, yes. I still
I'm sure
have
it's
a lot
good.
Of
I have
with
no idea what it does, but I'm sure it's
basically
totally
whenever you
like if I bold something for 2, it'll do it to 4 instead.
All your non-combat damage is just it goes up to 4. Which when you're talking about the Sunshot Militia, the 1/3 red creature. Mm-hmm. This thing just goes off. You just win the game. You just have 2 things and deal 4 to them.
That's insane. Yeah. Okay. It has more. When it dies, return it to the battlefield tapped and transformed under its owner's control, where it becomes Temple of Power, which is a land that taps for red. You can pay 2 in a red, tap it to transform it, but you can only activate it if red sources you controlled dealt 4 or more non-combat damage this turn, and you can only do it at sorcery speed. That seems quite difficult to line up, doesn't it?
Yeah, I don't think that is going to happen very often.
I have to do 4 or more non-combat damage to something?
Yeah, I mean, you can with Sunshot Militia. Like that's the card for this. So
yeah.
Basically, I would look at this card. I would look at Ogier Ixalan and think, well, how much do I want a 4/4 trample for 4 that dies into a mountain? And the answer is, a pretty good amount.
Kind of all the time, yeah.
That's pretty good. So I would be fine with just playing that card, and then some amount of the time, you're going to combo it with the Sunshot Militia and just get to really go off. You also sometimes will bring it back if things go really right, but that's just such a minor part of the card. I would say.
Because the back end's a little more forgiving. You just have to do the non-combat damage to something, but the front end's tough. It's only to players, to an opponent. Like, how often are you just firing off burn spells anyway? I guess more often if you've got this guy on the battlefield, but yeah, I kind of agree with you. It's really about that combo. That being said, it's still like a B, right? Like a 4 mana 4/4 trample.
The floor of 4 mana 4/4 trample that dies into a mountain. That's pretty good. So
that's pretty good.
B for Ogier Ixalan and be on the lookout for a Sunshot Militia.
Here's our boy, the Bone Horde Dracosaur. 3 red 5/5 flying first strike dinosaur dragon at Mythic. At the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top 2 cards of your library. you may play them this turn. If you exiled a land card, you get a 3/1 red dinosaur creature token. You just get one. It doesn't go away. And if you exiled a non-land card, you get a treasure. And yes, you can still play them as well. This is our preview card. This is the best preview card we've ever gotten.
Yeah, and it'll probably remain that way. I mean, this card is just completely nuts.
It's just stupid. The only question is it an A or an A plus? And I actually would give it an A plus. Is usually the dividing line is, can I play this and not die? This does actually give you quite a good chance of that. But this also lets you turn around a board where you were behind so quickly. If you just get to untap, which you have a good shot with a 5/5 flying first strike, if they don't kill it, you're going to win. And then you flood the board with treasures and dinosaurs and cards and all this nonsense. It just completely explodes. This is one of the highest upside cards we've had.
I mean, this basically draws you somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 to 4 cards when you untap.
It sure does.
Like if you exile 2 different types and then get to play them both, you get a 3/1, a treasure, a land, and whatever other spell you cast. And the treasure helps, and the land helps you cast that spell. So the card's just unbelievably dumb.
Can we go A plus?
Will this have the highest win rate in the set? It'll be close,
I would say that Aklazat's or whatever,
might have higher.
It would be higher. Yeah, just because of that. Just because you really can't get attacked and die the turn after you play it. This card, it's also very difficult too, though. But the lifelink is so much better than first strike in that situation. So A plus for Bonehorde Dracosaur, our boy. Next is Magmatic Galleon, which is 3 red for a 5/5 vehicle. It's obviously an artifact. Crew 2, it's rare. It says when Magmatic Galleon enters the battlefield, it deals 5 damage to target creature an opponent controls. And whenever one or more creatures your opponents control are dealt excess non-combat damage, you get a treasure token. Wow, this is awesome. So 5 mana sorcery, deal 5 damage to something, and if it had 4 or fewer toughness, then you get a treasure as well. And then it just leaves behind this 5/5 crew 2.
Yeah, great card.
I'm in for that. B plus for Magmatic Galleon? Is it an A? I don't know.
I would give it a B plus, I think.
Yeah. I mean, because either of those cards is mediocre, right? 5 mana sorcery, 5, even with the treasure. And then a 5 mana 5/5 vehicle crew 2 is also wouldn't be, it'd be a C minus or something. But you get both on one card. I mean, that's absurd. Trumpeting Carnosaur is 4 red for a dinosaur. This one's rare. And it's a 7/6 trample for 6. And when it enters a battlefield, you discover 5. And it says you can pay 2 and a red and discard Trumpeting Carnosaur. It deals 3 damage to target creature or planeswalker.
Unbelievably good card.
That's awesome. I kind of buried the lead there, didn't I?
I would give this an A minus, I think, if it was a 6 mana, 7/6 trample, discover 5.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that you can also have the buyout of discarding it to deal 3 is just incredible. You don't really want to do that, but if you have to, you will.
Definitely. And that covers 2 very different points in the game. One where you're trying to stabilize the board and not die, and one where you're trying to win after you've done that. Would you give it an A?
I would just give it an A.
I would too.
The card is just great.
It's perfect at any point in the game.
Yeah, basically.
Last red card is Hit the Motherlode. This is 4 red, so 7 mana sorcery at rare. And it says discover 10. If the discovered card's mana value is less than 10, create a number of tapped treasure tokens equal to the difference.
You're basically paying 7 mana to get the top card spell out of your deck, and then a bunch of treasures tapped, so you can't play another spell that turn.
Right. So I guess, the fact that it's an upgrade from 7 to 10 is probably not relevant as far as mana value goes. Right?
No, not really.
But you could get a 3. You could get a 1.
Yeah, and then you get a bunch of treasures. This card looks like an F. I just
That's
don't
an
think
F.
you should put
I'm
this.
off it.
You shouldn't put this card in your deck.
I don't think I want to hit the mother load. Green. First card is called Jade Light Spelunker. It is green X for a 1/1 Merfolk Scout at rare. And it enters the battlefield. When it enters the battlefield, it explores X times.
Great card. I mean, the sweet spot for this is probably like 3 or 4 mana, maybe 4 or 5 mana.
Mm-hmm.
But the cool thing is, as long as you're not playing it on turn 1, unless something weird's going on, maybe you're playing the Merfolk Bitter Blossom on turn 2. But
yeah, sure, yeah.
It's going to be a good deal. I mean, when you explore a bunch of times, like you're going to make sure you're not drawing a land next turn. I'll tell you that, and this will get some number of +1/+1 counters. So like you spend 4 mana on this, you explore 3 times. Let's say you hit land into good spell that you want to keep. You ended up paying 4 mana for a 3/3 that drew you a land.
Yeah,
and you kept a good spell on top.
Yeah.
Sounds great to me.
No, that sounds good. Yeah, I like this card. I would give Jade Light Spelunker a B.
Yeah, I like B for Jade Light Spelunker.
Super solid. Next is Intrepid Paleontologist. This is 1 and a green for a 2/2 human druid at rare. It taps to add 1 mana of any color. No restriction on that either. And you can pay 2 mana and exile target card from a graveyard. Wow, so you can really turn off their Descend. And it says you may cast dinosaur creature spells from among cards you own exiled with Intrepid Paleontologist. If you cast a spell this way, that creature enters the battlefield with a finality counter on it. So that's only if you hit your own dinosaurs.
Yeah.
Okay. But you can still nab their stuff out of a graveyard just to mess them up, and you still get a 2 mana 2/2 Bird of Paradise.
Yeah.
Sweet. That's a good card. Yeah.
Looks like a B+ to me. I'd be happy with this card.
Me too. Yeah. That is a lot. And that's giving you 2 very different things too. Next is Growing Rites of Ixalan. This is 2 and a green for a legendary enchantment at rare. And it says when it enters the battlefield, look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature card from among them and put it in your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. And it says at the beginning of your end step, if you control 4 or more creatures, you transform it into Ixalan Cradle of the Sun. It's a legendary land that taps for green or taps for green for each creature you control. This was an original Ixalan, right?
Yeah, this was. And I think it's still not very good. Like,
okay.
I just don't think that you can spend 3 mana to just go get a creature. And then
it's sorcery speed.
And then if you have a ton of creatures, it flips into a Gaia's Cradle, which is cool, but still, I just don't think that's the way you want to go about doing this. So I would basically give this an F. I just don't think that you should put this card in your deck.
Yeah, it's not in Modern Era limited. Next is Huatli, Poet of Unity. This is 2 and a green for a 2/3 legendary human warrior bard at Mythic rare. And it says, when Huatli enters the battlefield, search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, and put it into your hand, and then shuffle. Wow. And then you can pay either 3 white, 3 red, or 3 red-white, you can choose, to exile Huatli, then return her to the battlefield transformed under her owner's control at sorcery speed, and she becomes Roar of the Fifth People, which is a saga with 4 chapters. Chapter 1 is create 2 3/3 green dinosaur creature tokens. You kind of already have me there. Chapter 2 is Roar of the Fifth People gains creatures you control have tap to add green, red, or white. Chapter 3 is search your library for a dinosaur card, reveal it, and put it into your hand and then shuffle. And chapter 4 is dinosaurs you control gain double strike and freaking trample until end of turn, as if the game weren't already over at that point.
Yeah, Huatli is an A.
Crap, that card's awesome.
So first of all, you should put Huatli in any deck you have, even if you can't cast or flip her with the red-white cost. Because 2 and a green for a 2/3 that gets a basic land into your hand. That's already a great card. That's like a B+.
Yeah, exactly.
And then this is a flat A because if you can get to 5 mana, she always picks up one of the splash colors too. Like you can always search for a plains or a mountain. you just flip it into a saga that wins you the game, makes you 2 3/3s right away. And then next turn, your creatures tap for a bunch of mana. The next turn, you get a dino. And then next turn, your dinos just go and crush them.
Okay. So A for Huatli. A+ if you can flip it. Next is Pugnacious Hammer Skull. This is 2 and a green for a 6/6 dinosaur at rare. Whenever Pugnacious Hammer Skull attacks while you don't control another dinosaur, put a stun counter on it. It says if a permanent with a stun counter on it would become untapped, remove one from it instead. So you're actually getting a 3-mana 6/6 though?
You are getting a 3-mana 6/6 that can block, and then you don't have to attack with it. And then if you do want to attack with it, you are going to start losing out like on attacks, unless you have another dino. In which case you just get a 3-mana 6/6 no drawback.
Wow. And even then, it's just you're limited to every other turn of attacking. But if you want to block, you can just have a freaking 6/6, and you get like a free attack every other turn.
Yeah.
What if there's other stuff you can do?
I mean, it's great at fighting.
Yeah, fighting is really good.
If you have any fight cards, it's great.
I like B for Pugnacious Hammer Skull.
I was thinking B+, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, you just don't get usable 6/6 for 3 mana like that, this is pretty close actually. What does Sentinel of the Nameless City do?
It says 2 and a green for a 3/4 Merfolk Warrior Scout at rare. It has vigilance, and whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, you make a map. Again, a 3-mana card, really clean, delivers you a bunch of value right away. If it lives, it delivers you even more, and the stats are just priced to move. So I'll give A- to the Sentinel. I mean, your opponent plays this on turn 3, you're like, wow, that's going to dominate the board. They get a map right away, and then they just get another map whenever they attack. Like, okay.
Is this real? Like, is this a cycle, by the way?
I don't think it's like a
purposeful cycle. It's
just like a very specific cycle. But yes, there are like just 3-mana awesome creatures at rare.
Yeah, two in a color. We had the 2/4 with Death Touch. We had the 2/3 flying ward.
We have the 3/3 first strike.
That
goblin
and this guy. This is just nuts. Next is Bedrock Tortoise, which is 3 and a green for a 0/6 turtle. Oh, that bothers me. And it's rare. As long as it's your turn, creatures you control have hexproof. Okay. Each creature you control with toughness greater than its power assigns combat damage equal to its toughness rather than its power. So we have a 3-mana 6/6 and now a 4-mana 6/6.
Yep, 4-mana 6/6, and creatures have hexproof on your turn, and so they can't get hit by removal on your turn. And then if you have other creatures that have more toughness, they get to do their thing. Yeah,
the first line I don't care about really much at all. You know, it's much more common.
It's not 0, but yes, I agree. It's not like a huge thing.
It would be much better if they had hexproof on the other turn so that you could block with, double block without getting blown out by a removal spell. But whatever. I'm getting a 4-mana 6/6 with upside. I'm in. Like, that's a lot of heat to put down on the battlefield on turn 4. Just, power and toughness gets kind of a bad rap because we really do expect our creatures these days to come with a whole bunch of other stuff. But when there's enough of it, it's pretty good. And 6/6 for 4 mana is pretty good still.
Yeah. 6/6 for 4 mana with mostly upsides. Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, I guess it's all straight up upside, but it's not like huge ones. Like the hexproof thing's okay. The ability besides working on itself is not going to be like the most exciting in most decks, but 4-mana 6/6 with upside, I'll give this a B+.
Yeah, me too. Especially if you can just put like 1/5, all of a sudden this card gets a lot better. Next is Hulking Raptor, which is 2 green for a 5/3 dinosaur at rare. It has Ward 2, and at the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, you add green.
Great card. I mean, you don't get it the first turn you play it, but you play this on turn 4. They probably can't kill it very easily because it's pretty hard to kill a Ward 2 creature on that early. Mm-hmm. And then next turn, you're just up to 6 mana, 7 if you play a land. Yeah. The one downside is Ward 2 is nice, but the 3 toughness means that it will die in combat a lot, which Ward doesn't really protect you against. But you can choose to do that when you want. It's always going to be trading. It's not like it's going to be, getting eaten by anything. And then the mana bump could be really important as well. So I like Hulking Raptor. There's enough here for sure. Yeah. I would give it a B as well. Yeah. What about Cosmium
Confluence.
So this is 4 and a green. It's a sorcery at rare. You can choose 3, and you can choose the same mode more than once. The first mode is search your library for a cave and put it on the battlefield tapped. The second mode is put 3 +1/+1 counters on a cave you control. It becomes a 0/0 elemental with haste. Still a land. And the third mode is destroy target enchantment. So mostly what you're going to do with this is if it's not in the like late game, you're just going to cast this and put 3 caves into play in your cave deck. And now you like next turn, you just get to go off, especially since the caves, a lot of them have discover. So you're still going to get a spell out of them. Sometimes if you have enough caves in play and you don't need more in play, you can make a cave into like a 9/9 and attack or make it like a 6/6 and get another cave. And then I guess if they have enchantments you'll do that too. So right off the bat, this isn't playable without caves. Right. And usually a good amount of them. You don't want to just have 1 cave or 2 caves in your deck. You want to have like, probably at least 3 in your deck.
You want to be the caves deck, right?
Yes. Ideally, you're the caves deck. If you're not, this is probably not where you want to be. But when you're the caves deck, this looks like a very solid reason to be in the caves deck. Not like a bomb, but like still like a B. So it's like a build around B, I would say.
Okay, build around B for Cosmian Confluence. Next is Ogier Chasm, Deepest Growth. This is 3 green for a 6/5 legendary creature god. It is mythic rare and it has trample. So 5 mana, 6/5 trample. And when it deals combat damage to a player, reveal that many cards from the top of your library. You may put a creature card and or a land card from among them onto the battlefield. Put the rest on the bottom in a random order. And then when it dies, you return it to the battlefield tapped and transformed as Temple of Cultivation, which is a land that taps for green. You can pay 2 and a green and tap it to transform it, but you can only do it if you control 10 or more permanents and only at sorcery speed.
So you get a 5 mana 6/5 trample, and if it hits them, you get to put creatures and lands into play based on how much you hit them. Obviously, if they block with a 5/5, you're only hitting them for 1 excess point of damage. Then you get to reveal your top card and hope it's a creature or a land. But that's fantastic.
I like your chances of hitting them too.
It also dies into a forest, and the flip is probably the worst of the flip conditions. It's, I don't know, very close to what the red one is, which is to say impossible. 3 tap it, transform it if you have 10 permanents. So
that's a lot.
You probably have 6 lands. You have to have like 4 creatures or 7 lands and 3 creatures.
Yeah, it's not that it's impossible. It just takes
this
forever.
Is less possible. It just takes a long time.
Yeah. I mean, it is a nice card to get back. 6/5 trample ends the game pretty quickly.
I mean, this card's still an A. It's a 5 mana 6/5 trample that if they don't kill it, then you probably win the game. And if they do, you get a forest. And then eventually it comes back anyway.
Yeah. So, I also like it in green. I feel like the transforming into a land, this is the color that can take the best advantage of that. Like it just has more expensive stuff. It wants more rampy stuff. Yeah. So yeah, I like A for Ogier Chasm. Next is Galta Stampede Tyrant. This is, speaking of place to put mana, 5 green. So 8 mana for a 12/12 trampling legendary elder dinosaur at mythic rare. And when it enters the battlefield, put any number of creature cards from your hand onto the battlefield. Come on, Galta. There's nothing left by the time you're coming onto the battlefield.
Yeah, this is an F. I just don't think you want to put 8 mana cards in your deck that don't win the game on the spot, and I would not say this wins the game on the spot.
Yeah, it's also just kind of painful to put this right next to Ogier Chasm, 5 mana, 6/5 trample. Last green card is the Skullspore Nexus. This is 6 green, so another 8-drop. This one's also mythic. It's a legendary artifact. It says this spell costs X less to cast, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. We've seen this mechanic before, and you can get that price down real cheap. Oh, yeah. It's whenever 1 or more non-token creatures you control die, create a green fungus dinosaur creature token with base power and toughness, each equal to the total power of those creatures. You can also pay 2 mana and tap this to double target creature's power until end of turn. So if I have a 5/5 and a 4/4 die, I get a 9/9 token.
Yep.
I just get one?
if they trigger at the same time, it'll combine them. If they trigger at different times, you'll just get different tokens. But in combat, for example,
Oh my God.
but it is non-token, so it doesn't like go infinite, but it's still, it basically makes it so all your creatures like kind of die twice.
Yeah,
like
that's all pretty good.
And if you cast this, you probably have something decent in play because you're not casting it for 8 mana. You're casting it because you have a 4/4 in play or something along those lines.
Right. And then you can even activate it right away with doubling a creature's power. And you can do that at instant speed. So you can wait till they block and just annihilate them or whatever it's blocked. It makes all your things trade up, makes your tramplers just absolutely absurd. Because you just get to, double up their, wow. Okay. So what's the downside here? It can be tricky to get on the battlefield because you do need something medium sized to make it castable. Like you said, like a 4-power creature or something like that to make this into a 4-drop.
Yeah, the downside is that if you have no creatures in play or have a small board, this doesn't do much. But then, of course, the text also doesn't do much if you have no creatures in play. So This is a reward for having a deck full of creatures, especially big ones.
Yes.
Like it's a good dino card where, I mean, imagine this with a 3-mana 6/6.
Right.
So it's a build around, but if you can cast this for 2 mana because you have a 6/6 in play, and then now your creatures die into XXs, and you can also double when you have mana available, the card looks like a build around like A- to me.
It does to me too. That's what I was going to say. Build around A- for the Skull Spore Nexus. Okay, that's it for the monocolor. Now we get into gold where they really go nuts. First card is Abuelo Ancestral Echo. This is 1 blue-white for a 2/2 legendary spirit at rare, and it has flying and ward 2. So that's okay. It's still just a 3-mana 2/2 flyer even with the ward 2, but you can pay 1 blue-white to exile another target creature or artifact you control, return it to the battlefield to owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. So it lets you kind of slow flicker things.
Yeah, and a 3-mana 2/2 flying ward 2 is pretty tough to kill.
Yeah.
Like in the early game. And then in the late game, it just dominates the board with its ability.
Mm-hmm. You can do that anytime you want.
Anytime you want. So like if your opponent has like 6 mana up, you can't kill their creatures. They can chump block. They can retrigger ETBs. There's just a lot of stuff they can do. Right.
They can give their things effectively vigilance. I mean, there's a lot you can do. I would assume that Abuelo would become target number 1 in the late game. Yeah, that seems like a cool card. This is the type of card that I wish we had a few more of, which is there's a little bit of a build around element to it, but mainly it's just interesting and powerful, not just powerful, right? This isn't just like how many stats can we put on one card. This thing has cool applications. It has to live, but they make it harder for it to kill. But if it does, you're probably going to be able to do a bunch of cool stuff. I like B+ for Abuelo Ancestral Echo. I like the potential there. That card must be dealt with in the mid to late game.
Yeah, I like B+ for Abuelo, and I think it's going to be a pretty solid card. Pretty much any game it appears, and that the buy-in's very low. You just cast it.
Next is the Ancient One, which is blue-black for an 8/8. It's a spirit god at Mythic. It has Descend 8. The Ancient One can't attack or block unless there are 8 or more permanent cards in your graveyard, but you can pay 2 blue-black to draw a card, then discard a card. When you discard a card this way, target player mills cards equal to its mana value. So you get it on the battlefield, it can't attack or block, and then you start activating it.
Correct.
And then you pitch a permanent that say costs 5, and then you mill yourself for 5. And before you know it, the dang thing can start attacking and blocking. Also interesting here is that there is a threat of activation here, right? See, your opponent has 4, Descend 4. And they're like, am I going to attack you? Because you got 4 mana up, and things could go real bad for me from there if you just get to eat my attacker. That is another cool card.
It is cool. It's also like, it's nice that it's kind of a win condition. Like you can mill them out if you want, like if you don't care about descending.
Mm-hmm. So you can draw a card, discard a card, mill them, and just do that a few times and get the job done. That's awesome. See, like these first 2 cards are really interesting, really cool designs. They create interesting situations for the opponent. At what, when do you kill these? Do you have to right away? Can you afford to ignore Abuelo or the Ancient One for a turn or two? Because remember, if you pay 2 blue-black, draw a card, and then discard a spell, that affects your hand quality pretty directly. Now, you might be enabling other things down the line, but that's not normally what we see people do. Normally, you discard your weakest stuff or lands. And Ancient One almost encourages you to do the opposite of that. At any rate, what do you want to give it? Is it a B? Is it too slow to be a B?
It's a build around card because I don't think you want to put this card in your deck if you're not doing a good job descending.
Okay.
So
build around B plus or something?
Yeah, I would say it's like a build around B plus. I think it's going to be very good in blue black. In fact, this looks like a reward for playing blue black. Mm-hmm. What I don't think it is a card that you want to slot into your deck without really going hard on descend, because I think you're not going to succeed.
It's extremely clunky. Next is Whale of the Forgotten, which is same mana cost blue-black for a sorcery. This one's rare. It has Descend 8. It says choose one. If there are 8 or more permanent cards in your graveyard as you cast this spell, choose one or more instead. Three options. Return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. Again, this is a sorcery. You can have target opponent discard a card, but they get to choose it. Or you can look at the top 3 cards of your library, put one of them into your hand and the rest into your graveyard. Wow, and if you have Descend 8, you get to do all of it? Bounce a thing, they pitch a card, and you look at the top 3 and get one of them?
And by the time that you make it late enough, I think that they might have no cards in hand, so you could actually just bounce and make them straight up discard it right away.
Because it happens in order.
Yeah.
Okay.
Look, basically the way I see Whale of the Forgotten, I think the card's pretty good because blue-black sorcery, look at the top 3, put one in your hand, the rest in your graveyard, I think is a solid card for blue-black decks. Like, it helps enable Descend. You're spending 2 mana for some card selection. It really just isn't that bad. And then sometimes you can make them discard. That's probably the weakest mode in general, or you can bounce something if you really have to. And then later in the game, this might become on, in which case you're getting a really good deal. So I view it as kind of like a cheap enabler for a blue-black Descend deck that also happens to be a payoff if it takes long enough.
Yeah, that seems awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, is it a C plus?
I would just give it I would give it a C plus, yeah.
Yeah, it's just right in that range. What does Molten Collapse do?
This one's great. It's red-black. It's a sorcery at rare. Choose one, and if you descended this turn, you may choose both instead. Destroy target creature or planeswalker. Destroy target non-creature, non-land permanent with mana value 1 or less. And you get to straight up destroy a creature or planeswalker. So that's just straight up red-black sorcery Dreadbore.
Okay.
And excellent. You can also blow up a little artifact, right? A non-creature, non-land permanent with mana value 1 or less. Mostly what you're going to do, though, is you're just going to cast this as Dreadbore, and sometimes you'll descend and you get to pick off one of their like treasure tokens or something just alongside that. But it's a B. Molten Collapse is a good card, and then gets even a little better sometimes.
Polani's Hatcher is 3 green red for a 5/3 dinosaur at rare, and it says other dinosaurs you control have haste. When Polani's Hatcher enters the battlefield, create 2 0/1 green dinosaur egg creature tokens. And at the beginning of combat on your turn, if you control 1 or more eggs, sacrifice an egg, then create a 3/3 green dinosaur creature token.
Great card.
So you just get that. You get one of them just straight away. Like if you first main phase this thing.
Yeah, you play this as a 5/3, and then immediately get a 3/3 that can attack them. And then next turn you get another one, and then it just sticks around as a 5/3 that gives things haste.
And I finally have a combo for my Rook Egg deck from 1995 or whatever.
Yeah.
Wow, I'm really doing it. Oh, this is awesome. So you're just getting 8 power and 6 toughness for 5 mana, like if you make it to combat.
Yes,
and
which
3 of it has haste.
One step.
Right, which is like go to combat. And then you have another 3/3 lined up if they don't do something. Wow.
And if they do, you still have a 0/1. That's not nothing.
Yeah. What do we give for cards like this that give you just raw power and toughness like this?
traditionally we would give A grades for cards that give you this much power and toughness for this little investment. This card's an A. I mean, look, in the rare case where they have an instant speed removal, then yeah, you get 2/0/1s out of this, or they counter, you get nothing, whatever. Imagine just a close game where on turn 5, one of the players casts this, attacks with the 3/3, and then next turn gets, another 3/3. Like, the game is just, how do you beat that?
Yeah, no, that's incredible. Okay. A for Polani's Hatcher. Next is Sovereign Okinek Ahau, which is 2 green-white for a 3/4 legendary cat noble at Mythic. It has Ward 2, and whenever it attacks, for each creature you control with power greater than that creature's base power, put a number of +1/+1 counters on that creature equal to the difference.
One of my least favorite text boxes in the set.
I hate it. I absolutely hate it. So if I put an equipment that gives my creature +1/+0, I get a +1/+1 counter?
Correct. Basically, you get +1/+1 counters equal to the amount you've already been buffed.
Okay.
But
I hate that text box. I just don't think it's worth it. But okay, whatever. So 4 mana, 3/4 Ward 2 that gives me a bonus for buffing my creatures in some way or another.
Yeah, I like the card. I mean, 4 mana, 3/4 Ward 2 is like on the weak side, but still pretty burly. It's not the easiest for your opponent to deal with. It's good in combat, hard to get removed. And then it has a very threatening text box where if you ever just get even 2 +1/+1 counters out of this, then you got a massively good deal.
Yeah, and this really does incentivize you to play equipment particularly, right? Because if I understand it, if I give it +2/+0 to something, attack it, the counters on it, I can move the equipment, but that other thing will also pick up an additional 2 counters because of the counters, right?
Yes, it stacks on itself.
Yeah, so that's nice. Yeah, I think Sovereign looks like a build around B. Like, if I have some ways to buff my creatures, this is totally going in my deck every single time.
Yeah, agreed.
Next is Amalia Benavides Aguirre. Boy, they really went deep. It is black-white for a 2/2 legendary vampire scout at rare. And it has Ward, pay 3 life. So if they target it, they have to pay 3 life to have their thing resolved. It says whenever you gain life, this thing explores, then destroy all other creatures if its power is exactly 20.
So this is a combo in Pioneer with Wild Growth Walker, where when you explore, you gain life, and then it explores again, and you gain life again, and it immediately eventually gets up to 20 and blows everything up. But
wow. Really clever.
But in this format in Limited, it's white-black for a 2/2 Ward, which, pay 3 life to make them targeted is kind of nice. Like, if they want to kill it, they just get punched. But mostly it's like you get free explorers whenever you gain life. And in white-black, there's like tokens with lifelink. There's like, stuff you'll sack a Tinker's to gain 3 sometimes, whatever. I view this as like a C+. It's just like a 2 mana 2/2 that's not that hard to cast if you're these 2 colors and has like some little minor upsides. It's not a bomb though.
C+ for Amalia. Next is Vito, Fanatic of Aklazats. This is 2 black-white for a 4/4 legendary vampire demon. This one's mythic rare. It does have flying, so you got a 4 mana 4/4 flyer. Whenever you sacrifice another permanent, you gain 2 life if this is the first time this ability has resolved this turn. If it's the second time, each opponent loses 2 life. If it's the third time, you get a 4/3 white and black vampire demon creature token with freaking flying.
So 4 mana 4/4 flying. I'm in. I'll play that card.
Yep.
It'll be a good card. Affect the board nicely. And then the first time you sack, you gain 2 is a nice way to make it so your sack deck doesn't run out of life before it gets its thing going. And if you're really going, you start to make them lose 2, and then in the third time you get the huge payoff. So this looks like a B to me, like with build around, of course, making it even better.
Yes,
but overall, just being a good card.
B for Vito. Next is Sahili, the Sun's Brilliance. This is blue-red for a 2/2 legendary human artificer, also at Mythic Rare. Activated ability, blue-red tap. And you can create a token that's a copy of another target creature or artifact you control, except it's an artifact in addition to its other types. It gains haste. Sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. Whew. That's a nice one.
Yeah, it's pretty sweet. I had a pick in the streamer event where it was that or a braid, pick one, pack one. I took this knowing a braid is just going to be the right pick there.
Yeah.
And
this is way sweeter.
It actually played out in a pretty cool way, though. It was hard to have it stick. So the main problem with Saheeli is you take this card, you kind of build your deck around it, and then your opponent's going to kill it a good amount of the time.
Yeah, that's tough.
But if you do get to use Saheeli, then the card is really good. You get to make a chump blocker at the very worst. If you have ETB effects, it can get really nice. You can maybe make some attacks if you want. And then you got a variety of ways, like it's good with sacrifice stuff. There's just cool stuff you can do with it.
Yeah, that seems pretty cool. Like you said, the hard part is it's only 2 toughness and you have to make it all the way to your next turn. What would you give it? You played with it.
I would just give it a B. Like, okay. It's a 2-mana 2/2 that you do need to have this card live for it to work. And at 2 toughness, it's not always going to do that. But I still think it's going to be a fine card. And look, when your opponent has this on the board, if you can't kill it, you're going to be kind of unhappy about that.
Yeah, for sure. Next is the Belligerent, which is 2 blue-red for a 5/5 legendary artifact vehicle. This one's rare. Crew cost is 3, which is really kind of the dividing line where once it gets up into 3, you better mean business. And it says, whenever it attacks, you create a treasure token. All right. And until end of turn, you may look at the top card of your library anytime, and you may play lands and cast spells from the top of your library. Oh. So, but that all happens after it attacks.
Yeah. Basically, you need this to attack in order to get the full value from it.
Okay. So you get a treasure, and then assuming that it survives combat, you go to your next main phase, and you can just start going off.
Yeah. You get to go as deep as you want. It's until end of turn. You just get to like do the whole thing.
Okay. As much mana and spells and whatnot is on the top. This seems very clunky to me.
Well,
Crew 3 is rough.
Crew 3, if it was Crew 2, I'd be pretty high on this.
Me too.
At Crew 3, I think it's just okay.
That's what I think too. There's some upside though. I mean, it's a little weird, but I mean, I like the play pattern. You crew it up and attack. That doesn't cost you any mana. You didn't have to play a land. Then you can look at the top, hopefully get a land, and you get the treasure to give you that little bonus bump to maybe get 2 cards off top of your library or something. They are very incentivized to kill this or to double block or whatever. Yeah, okay, sure. Like B-?
I would just give it a B. This card's pretty threatening. Like,
it is very threatening.
I mean, imagine they have 3 power in play, and then on turn 4 they play this and say go. Like, you can't kill it with sorcery speed removal.
Yeah, true.
If they get to crew and attack and you can't kill it, you're just in for a world of hurt because they get a treasure and they're probably playing 1 card or 2 cards. Like, they're probably minimum playing like 1 card. And very easily playing like 3. Land 2 cheap spells is just very much in the range.
That'll happen a lot. Yeah, okay.
And then once you hit with this once, you're really set up the next time. You have tons of material.
Yeah.
But let me keep going. Oh. You leave up mana to kill this. Your savvy opponent, Marshall Sutcliffe, susses that out. And he says, I'm not going to crew the Belligerent. I'm just going to play another card. Oh. And then what?
Yeah, that's really good. Okay.
Wow, you really make this card look good the way you're playing it.
I'm playing great right now. Yeah. So B for the Belligerent.
Yeah.
Okay. B for Belligerent. I like that. Squirming Emergence is next. This is 1 green-black for a rare sorcery. It has Fathomless Descent. Return to the battlefield, target non-land permanent card from your graveyard with mana value less than or equal to the number of permanent cards in your graveyard.
This is exactly the kind of card I don't like, where when you're not doing the thing, this card's a complete blank. Like, you don't have good cards in your graveyard. Right. You don't have enough permanents to make it work. It's just a 3-mana hole in your hand. It's the black hole. It's a void. Mm-hmm. When it works, you're spending 3 mana to get the best card of your graveyard into play. Like, that's not that crazy. Like, look, I guarantee you're going to have a game against the green-black Descend deck. It's going to be this wild game. You're punching back and forth. You're both on no cards. They draw and cast this, and it's going to be the best card you can imagine because they have 15 cards in their graveyard, and now they get their 6/6 back.
Mm-hmm.
Can you imagine this card in your opening hand?
Oh, God, pure misery, even in that deck. Yeah, this seems like a kind of an extreme payoff for a build-around, but like even then, it's not always amazing.
I would say,
go ahead.
I would say it's a build around C where, like, look, when you're doing this thing, this card is good in the deck. When you're at a green-black deck that has a ton of ways to mill and discard and you have a lot of Descend stuff going, sure, add a Squirming Emergence, it'll be fine. This is absolutely not a card you should first pick and try to build around. It's just not that good. So it's a good card in the right deck, but it's not a card that pushes you towards that direction.
Yeah. Sounds good. Next is the Myco Tyrant. This is 1 green-black, so same mana cost. For a star legendary elder fungus at Mythic, it's got trample, and its power and toughness are each equal to the number of creatures you control that are fungi and or saplings. And at the beginning of your end step, create X 1/1 black fungus creature tokens with, this creature can't block, where X is the number of times you descended this turn. So there's the catch at the end. So you get a 1/1 trample for 3 if you don't have anything else. But if you can start the descend train rolling, you can start spitting out a bunch of fungus creature tokens, and then this thing can become a 5/5 or whatever it is down the line.
Yeah. I mean, it really double pays you because every time it triggers, you get that many tokens and it gets that much bigger.
Yeah, true.
So it's a pretty awesome payoff for this. The question is, how often do you have to descend to make this good? And the answer is really not that much because it's by itself a 1/1, and then some of the other cards in those colors are bigger or are already fungus that'll make it bigger. And then whenever it descends, it's getting 2/2. You're getting 2/2 worth of stats. Granted, some of it can't block.
Yeah, but if you descend twice in a turn, you're already doing fine, right?
Yeah, this is already at least a 3/3, and you have 2 1/1s.
Yeah.
That are good to sacrifice and do other stuff with.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I'm not blown away by the Myco Tyrant, but it looks solid. I would play it.
Yeah. I think the Myco Tyrant looks like a B.
Yeah. In a descend deck. Next is Anim Pakal, 1000th Moon. This is 1 red-white for a 1/2 legendary human soldier at rare. Whenever you attack with 1 or more non-gnome creatures, put a +1/+1 counter on Anim Pakal, then create X 1/1 colorless gnome artifact creature tokens that are tapped and attacking, where X is the number of +1/+1 counters on Anim Pakal.
So this is kind of like Krenko, if you remember that card, the 1/2, where like the first time you attack with something else, even this doesn't even have to attack, just be in play. It gets a +1/+1 counter and you get a 1/1 attack. And the next time it gets another +1/+1 counter, and then now there's 2 1/1s attacking, and so on and so forth.
Okay.
Great card. I mean, it gives you a bunch of stats, gives you a bunch of material. It doesn't ask much of you, and it could even attack itself to get things going if you got nothing else. But obviously, it's at its best. If you go 2-drop into this and they don't have a blocker for a 1/1, like they're in a lot of trouble.
Definitely. Yeah. The only downside, of course, is that it is understated on its own. It really does need to get to the point of being able to enable some type of attack.
Yeah.
With your creatures.
But even just 1 makes this a 2/3. Even if the gnome dies, you have a 2/3 now, and next turn you're threatening to have a 3/4 that has 2 counters. Like,
yeah. I like B for Anim Pakal. Maybe it's B+. What do you think? B+?
I'm on B+ for Anim Pakal. I think Anim Pakal is pretty good.
Okay. Next is Quintorius Canned, which is 3 red-white for a 4 loyalty Planeswalker. This is, of course, legendary mythic rare. Static ability is whenever you cast a spell from exile, Quintorius deals 2 damage to each opponent and you gain 2 life. You can +1 Quintorius to create a 3/2 red and white spirit creature token. Wow. Okay, I'm already sold. You can -3 to discover 4. And you can -6 on an ultimate that you can definitely get to exile any number of target cards from your graveyard, add red for each card exiled this way, and you may play those cards this turn.
There's a funny Pioneer combo deck where you have all clones and no cards that cost less than them. And you go discover 4, hit a clone that can clone Quintorius like Spark Double. Discover 4, hit another one. And every time you do that, you drain them for 2. It's really weird.
Because you're casting spells from exile every time? Yeah. That's hilarious. It's really funny. That's really funny. This card seems great.
Oh, it's very good. I mean, 5 mana for a 4 loyalty Planeswalker that immediately goes up to 5 loyalty and you have a 3/2 blocker is pretty hard to beat, except with flyers. And then if you're in a tough spot and you don't have nothing better to do, you can just -3 it to discover and try to hit something. Though most of the time you're going to want to +1 it. A lot of just because you get I think a better thing overall.
Yeah.
And then at some point you can get up to -6 and then really go off.
Yeah. So if you -3 straight away, you do get to drain, assuming you cast a spell, you get to drain them for 2 and then you get whatever you hit. But you're down to 1 loyalty.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like your plan of +1ing as the default. Quintorius looks like an A to me.
Yeah, I would just say an A. Like
if anything, it's an A-, but I would still give it an A.
Probably closer to an A- anyway, but it's the kind of Planeswalker that defends itself nicely, draws cards nicely if you need it to. Like making a 3/2 every turn for 0 mana is pretty close to drawing a card. And then it also has the discover thing, the fact that you can just randomly drain them by casting spells from exile if you have other discover cards or anything like that. And then it's got a reasonably fast ultimate that does threaten them. You get to load up the graveyard and then do that. So overall, I think Quintorius is a solid A-.
Yep, agreed. Next is Deep Fathom Echo. This is 2 green-blue for a Merfolk Spirit at rare. It's a 4/4. And it says, at the beginning of combat on your turn, Deep Fathom Echo explores. Then you may have it become a copy of another creature you control until end of turn.
So it's a 4 mana 4/4 that explores every turn. That's already pretty solid. You don't really need much to kind of convince me to play that. And then every now and then it'll copy something else, though I don't think that'll happen that often.
Yeah, that's not really the important part. This is just a solid value machine. I would give it a B+ for Deep Fathom Echo.
Yeah, I'd just give it a B, I think. I think it's just fine.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I like 4/4 for 4 with upside. Last gold card is Gishath Sun's Avatar, which is 8 mana, 5 red, green, white for a 7/6 legendary dinosaur avatar at Mythic Rare. So we've got a 3-colored 8-drop here. It does have vigilance, trample, and haste. And whenever it deals combat damage to a player, reveal that many cards from the top of your library, put any number of dinosaur creature cards from among them onto the battlefield, and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. I mean, can we even play this card in Limited? I don't think we did much before.
No, the other Ixalan was pretty fast. Not that this format doesn't have some speed to it, but it's 3 colors. It doesn't have lifelink. That would have been a very different sort of thing. And it's the sort of thing where if you just cast this and don't get a hit in, you're not going to win. And if you cast this and you hit them, you get another dino. Sure, but that's a lot of ifs for an 8-drop. Yeah, that I don't think I'm in for playing this card.
I would assume it's an F. If
I think
you just never
F,
played
and
it, you shouldn't.
If you're maybe in a spot where you have infinite ramp and you can maybe swing it, I could see running it, but I don't think you should play this card really.
Yeah, that's how I feel too. Artifacts. First one is called Throne of the Grim Captain. This is 2 mana for a legendary artifact at rare. It taps to mill 2 cards. Does that mean I can just mill myself only?
Yeah. If it doesn't say target player, it just is milling yourself.
Okay. And then it says craft with a dinosaur, a merfolk, a pirate, and a vampire for 4. And it flips over into the Grim Captain, which is a 7/7 legendary skeleton spirit pirate with menace, trample, lifelink, and hexproof. And whenever the Grim Captain attacks, each opponent sacrifices a non-land permanent. Then you may put an exiled creature card used to craft the Grim Captain onto the battlefield under your control, tapped and attacking. Is it possible to craft this?
Yeah, I think it is.
Okay.
I don't think it's easy, but I think it's definitely possible. I think this thing has like basically two things going that kind of complement each other. The first is that it's a 2-mana artifact that taps to mill 2, which you could put in a lot of blue-black decks, and actually that's a card they want.
Okay.
Like that are just going hard on self-milling. Once you're at that point, you kind of get Merfolk and Vampire at relatively free in blue-black, and then Pirate as well. So you just kind of have to just get some dinosaurs in there so that you can do this thing. But you have to be going really hard on self-milling in order to make that a possibility.
This feels like a week 5 challenge. Like, I'm not going to play this in the beginning stages when I'm trying to actually win a bit and figure out what's going on in the format. But once I get a little bored, I'm screenshot hunting for my,
I don't think it's crazy to think this is a good card. I think it's a build around. I think it's like a build around B though, where in your blue-black deck, I think you can actually make this card work because it enables your other cards while being a payoff itself. That's the kind of the combo you want, right?
Seems like kind of crazy, but okay. I'm with you. I mean, I want to do it. I want to do the thing, and the payoff is certainly absurd.
Yeah.
It doesn't have haste, so it's basically useless, but
I mean, if you flip it, you do just win, basically.
Do you?
I mean, it's pretty hard to imagine.
They can just kill it.
It's got hexproof. They can't just
Does it have hexproof?
Oh, it is lifelink and hexproof. This card is not really beatable.
Yeah, you're not going to beat that. What do you want to give it? So build around grade for starters.
Yeah.
What do you want to give it?
I would give it a build around B.
Okay, because you really do think that the 2-mana mill thing is something that is quite good in that deck, quite valuable.
Yeah, I think that deck can utilize that in a way that works out pretty nicely.
And then it's really just getting that pesky dinosaur in there. Next is Tarian's Soul Cleaver, which is 1 mana for a legendary equipment. It's rare. The equipped creature has vigilance, and whenever another target artifact or creature is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on the equipped creature, and the equip cost is 2.
Yeah.
I don't like this.
I'm not super into this one. I think that
this is supposed to be a sacrifice payoff, or?
Yeah, it's a sack payoff, but I just don't think that you're going to end up wanting to spend 1 for this, equip it, and then other things have to die to make this creature better. And if they ever deal with that creature, you don't really end up ahead or anything like that.
Seems terrible. I mean, they can even kill the creature out from under it if it was going to get the counter. Like, Tarian Soul Cleaver looks like an F to me.
Yeah, looks like an F to me as well.
Next is the Millennium Calendar. This is
Fs.
1 mana for a legendary artifact. It's mythic rare. Whenever you untap 1 or more permanents during your untap step, put that many time counters on the Millennium counter. You can pay 2, tap it to double the number of time counters on the Millennium Calendar. And when there are 1,000 or more time counters on the Millennium Calendar, sacrifice it, and each opponent loses 1,000 life.
Love this card. I think this card is really neat.
Jay texted me that he opened this in his sealed pool today.
I mean, I don't think this card is particularly good, but I think it's pretty funny.
Why is it not good? I wouldn't have to do anything in the game other than wait.
Yeah.
And doubling does actually add up really, really, really fast.
It does, but it just takes way too long and does nothing while it's doing that. Like this card's an F and you know it. Like you would never put this card in your deck.
A coward is among us. I see. F for the Millennium Calendar. Next is Treasure Map. 2 mana for an artifact. You can pay 1 and tap it to scry 1. And then you put a landmark counter on Treasure Map. Then if there are 3 or more landmark counters on it, you remove them and transform it. And when you do that, you get 3 treasures and it becomes Treasure Cove, which is a land that taps for colorless, or you can tap it and sacrifice a treasure to draw a card. It's quite a powerful artifact.
If you scry 3 times, you sunk 5 mana into this. You got 3 scries out of it, the deal. That's not great. But then all of a sudden you get a land and 3 treasures, and then those treasures you can also sack to draw cards.
This is look, as long as you're not getting absolutely ran over, Treasure Map is a very reasonable place to put some mana, get your mana back, get a land, get a bunch of cards. Like it definitely pays you back. The only issue is if your opponent goes 1 drop, 2 drop, and then is going to play some haster on 3 or whatever, treasure map looks a little slow. But on an average format, treasure map's definitely worth it. It's like a B.
I think it's a B. It takes a little bit of time, but it's well worth it. It pays you back that time. It pays you back the mana mostly by getting you 3 treasures plus a land that then taps for mana, and it definitely pays you back the cards.
All right. Next is Mazzalanti.
Matzalanti.
Thank you. Mazzalanti, the Great Door. This is 3 mana for a legendary artifact at rare. It taps to draw a card and discard a card. 3 mana loot rock. Okay. And then you can pay 4 mana and tap it, and it transforms into, or you can only activate it if there are 4 or more permanent types among cards in your graveyard. Artifact, battle, creature, enchantment, land, and planeswalker are permanent types. And then it becomes the core, which is a legendary land with fathomless descent. Tap, add X mana of any one color where X is the number of permanent cards in your graveyard. Ooh.
Yeah.
That's spicy.
So the way I would look at this card is how much do you want a 3 mana looting rock? And most decks are just not that interested in that, I don't think. It's just 3 mana to not affect the board, and you're even down a card. But I could see this blue-black or black-green deck that really wants to fill its graveyard with Descend actually use this card. And then at some point you take a turn off by flipping this, and then now you have a land that taps for 7 mana or something like that.
Yeah. You get to pick a color too. Interesting. So do we want to go build around?
Yeah, I would say it's a build around C. Like it's on the low end of enablers. Like Grim Captain's Throne, for example, is a much faster self-mill effect and gives you a real payoff. So like it's a lot better than this sort of thing. But this does smooth out your draws. You are getting access to new cards. So I would give Mazzalanti a build around C. It's just like a heavy descent build around, but it's not that great of a card.
Next is Roaming Throne, which is 4 mana for a 4/4 artifact creature golem at rare. It has Ward 2. And as it enters the battlefield, you choose a creature type. It is the chosen creature type in addition to its other types. And if a triggered ability of another creature you control of the chosen type triggers, it triggers an additional time. How do you feel about four colorless mana or 4 generic mana for a 4/4 Ward 2?
It's fine. It's a C level card, C plus level card probably.
And so then you just think about whatever, just look at your hand and whatever thing you have that has triggered ability, name that.
Or you've like drafted a Merfolk deck because all the Explore Merfolk, you get to double explore whenever you do this. And that's the biggest combo. So I would kind of view this as somewhat a blue greenish card. Like you don't have to be both those colors or really either, but those are the colors where I think it's going to work best. So I would give the Roaming Throne probably a B-. Like it's a solid card. One trigger out of this and you kind of feel like you got paid back.
Yeah, you do. I mean, 4 mana, 4/4 Ward 2 is already okay. So B- for Roaming Throne. Next is Chimil, the Inner Sun, which is 6 mana for a legendary artifact. It is mythic rare. It says spells you control can't be countered. And at the beginning of your end step, discover 5. That just keeps happening.
Love this card. Like, yes, you spent 6 mana on this, but you immediately discover 5. You just hope to hit anything with power and toughness. And then if they don't kill you, every single turn you get to play your top spell for free.
Yeah.
Like, you're going to win that game pretty quickly because this not only draws you an extra card every turn, it's never a land and it pays for that.
And it pays. So you could just cast stuff from your draw step in your hand as normal.
Yes.
And then
at the end of turn, you just get to drop a thing into play.
Dude, this is awesome. That's really good, actually.
Yeah, I think it is.
I think the only downside that you'd want to make sure you build it such that you don't have a lot of like conditional spells, right? Like counters.
Yes, you want to stay away from counters and pump spells, but
yeah,
if pack 3, you open this card, you should probably just take it. I think it's an A.
Yeah, I think it's an A also.
The fail case on this is they blow it up, and sure, that can happen.
Right.
But most of the time, you're going to affect the board the turn you play this by discovering something, and then that'll help stabilize, and then you just will win any game where you're just doing this every single turn.
Yeah, for me, the difference is that it triggers on your end step. Like you get it effectively right away versus having
this
to
would be like
upkeep.
A full grade and a half lower if it was like on your upkeep.
Yeah, it's crazy. Last actually artifact is Threefold Thunder Hulk, which is 7 mana. It's in the Luis.
That's what they used to call you, right?
It's a 7 mana 0/0 artifact creature gnome at rare. Threefold Thunder Hulk.
I ruined you.
You really did. Enters the battlefield with 3+1/+1 counters on it. Whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, create a number of 1/1 colorless gnome artifact creature tokens equal to its power. Sweet. And you can pay 2 and sacrifice another artifact to put a +1/+1 counter on it.
So 7 mana for 6/6 worth of stats immediately. A 3/3 plus 3 1/1s. And then if you get to live to your next turn, you're probably going to sack some of those 1/1s to make this into like a 6/6. Like you imagine you just sack all 3 1/1s immediately. Now this is a 6/6 and you attack and make 6 1/1s.
I'm getting Pentavite vibes here. I like it. I really like it, by the way. Like this is the type of card that if I can work my way up to 7 mana, it actually stabilizes. I mean, 3/3 and 3 1/1s is like, you ain't dying.
Yeah, it's pretty hard for this to die, for you to die the turn you played 4 blockers on the ground.
Right.
If they kill this, yeah, you spent 7 mana and they probably spent like 5 or 4. But then you got 3 1/1s out of the deal. That's just not the end of the world. Right. And if you ever untap with this, then it's a pretty significant threat. It's a game ender.
It is. It's an interesting decision point as well, because it's when it attacks is when you get the thing. So you want it to be as big as possible there. But also, like, you could just attack with it as a 3/3, make 3 1/1s, and be like, what are you going to do? I played a land. I've got 8 mana. I can spend all 8 mana to sacrifice any number of these things to mess with combat, right? And they're probably just like, or kill you or whatever. So, you know, if the way is clear, sure, stack them all up and just make a bunch of 1/1s. But if it's not, you can really still make a decent amount of 1/1s and put your opponent in a bad spot. I like Threefold Thunderhulk. That is a place to put 7 mana that I'm actually happy with.
The way to use this card, by the way, I'm reading through this and looking at it. You don't sack and then attack. You say, okay, go to attack. They're like, okay. So you're like, all right, I attack. The ability triggers in response. You start sacking artifacts.
Oh, you can work it that way too?
Yeah, it's even better.
Oh, interesting.
So that's a huge upside. So imagine your opponent has just generic 5 mana destroy target creature in hand.
Mm-hmm.
They pass. They're waiting for you to like load up the Thunderhulk. You just go to attacks. They just have to let you attack.
Yeah.
Because if you attack and then start sacking stuff, if they kill it in response, it'll still just use last known information when that ability resolves.
Okay, yeah. So they're just kind of screwed either way.
So you're never forced to commit. So you remember that if you're playing this card.
Can I give it a B+, like as a
Yeah, you can give this a B+.
semi build around?
This seems like an interesting build around for sure.
Okay, we've got a few lands to cover, and then we are done. First land is called Restless Anchorage. It is land. It is a rare land, I should say. It enters the battlefield tapped, and there's a cycle of these. They all enter the battlefield tapped, and they all tap for 2 colors. This one taps for for white or blue. And the activated ability is 1 blue white. Until end of turn, Restless Anchorage becomes a 2/3 white and blue bird creature with flying. It's still a land. And it says whenever it attacks, you create a map token. Nice.
I really do like that card.
Very solid creature land. So this is just for blue-white, though?
Yeah, I mean, it's just a nice little blue-white creature land that generates value in maps. And I think that this is a card that would pull me pretty heavily towards blue-white, and you would consider splashing. It's pretty powerful if you can use the maps nicely.
Yeah.
Like, because it's the sort of thing where, let's say you're like red-blue and you're debating whether to splash white. This not only gives you white mana for your other white cards, but also if you draw a second white to go with this, you then get another payoff itself.
Yeah, treasure or whatever. Nice. I mean, this looks like a B-level card to me.
Yeah.
In its color pair.
at the risk of spoiling it, I think all the creature lands are Bs. Like this is one of the better ones, but they're all just a B because if you're in that color pair, getting a land that comes to play taps for both your colors, that's already playable, and then you can animate it later. It's like 2 cards for the price of 1. Mm-hmm. So we should go through them to talk about what they do, but like they're all very good.
Okay. Next one is Restless Reef. This is the black-blue version. You can pay 2 black-blue, so this actually costs an additional mana, but it becomes a 4/4 blue and black shark creature with Death Touch, and when it attacks, target player mills 4 cards.
Yeah, I really like this one too.
Yeah, I like that you can mill yourself to set up your descent, but you can also mill them to kill them at some point. 4 cards is a lot, especially if you can say, okay, I can get an attack here and then get another attack in. Like that's 8 cards. Like that starts to add up really quick. The next one is Restless Vents, which is the black-red version. It is back down to 3/1 black-red, and it becomes a 2/3 black and red insect creature with Menace. And when it attacks, you may discard a card. If you do, draw a card. Okay. That's probably one of the weaker, but still totally good.
Yeah, by the time you're activating these, you kind of want to spend more to get more. And this is a smaller one with no combat abilities besides Menace, which is okay. But I do like that it like helps when you're flooded. This card is pretty nice.
Definitely. Yeah, I could see not desperation, but needing to activate that a little early to try to set up future turns. Next is the green-red. It's called Restless Ridgeline, and this one's back up to 4 mana, so 2 red-green. It becomes a 3/4 red and green dinosaur until end of turn. So no abilities. But when it attacks, another target attacking creature gets +2/+0 until end of turn, and you untap that creature. But it can't target itself.
Yeah, it's kind of a beating if you have something else to attack with it.
Yeah, that's pretty tough because they really want to double block a 3/4. And this makes it kind of difficult to take that huge hit each time. And then the last one is Restless Prairie, which is the green-white version. Again, 4 mana, so 2 green-white.
Best part of the cycle, by the way.
What is it? Oh, that's nice. What, am I missing something?
It's a llama.
Oh my God, I didn't even see it. That is amazing. Restless Prairie becomes a 3/3 green and white llama. All right, I get it now.
I can't believe you didn't see that. That's
I couldn't see it. Thing. I thought it would be looking the other way. Until end of turn, it's still a land. So this is also just a 3/3 creature. But when it attacks other creatures you control, get +1/+1 until end of turn. Now I can't unsee the llama.
Yeah, it's great.
That's awesome.
So if I had to rank them, I bet the blue-black one might be the best, followed by like the blue, like blue-black and blue-white are like the best, followed by green-white and green-red, and then red-black's the worst. But like they're all good, and they're not really. Which ones are better isn't really going to change your ranking too much in terms of like when you're going to take them.
Right, because it's not like they're interchangeable anyway. 3 more lands. One of them is a mythic rare called Cavern of Souls. It's a land that when it enters the battlefield, you choose a creature type. It taps for colorless or 1 mana of any color, but you can only spend the mana to cast a creature spell of the chosen type, and that spell can't be countered.
It's an F. Like
I was gonna say, is there a home for this at all? Unlimited?
This isn't a tribal set where you're going to have so many of the same type that this is going to mana fix you, and it's not. Here's the exception, and this is where best of 3 can be really fun. If you're playing like a long match against someone and you've seen a lot of their decks, each other's decks, and you've got like this creature bomb and they have sided in some counter spells or playing a deck with counters to deal with it, I could see being like, oh, I'm going to side in a cheeky Cavern of Souls and I'm going to get them.
Dinosaur, Galta or whatever, like taste it. Yeah.
But I don't think that's a very likely occurrence to happen.
That's a good sealed edge case as well. But yeah, otherwise you shouldn't put Cavern of Souls in your normal deck. Next is Echoing Deeps. This is a cave. It's rare. And it says you may have Echoing Deeps enter the battlefield tapped as a copy of any land card in a graveyard, except it's a cave in addition to its other types, and it taps to add 1 colorless. So does it ETB tapped regardless? Or is it saying I can just skip this whole block of text and just have it be
untapped? You could play it as an untapped cave if you want.
Okay. Because I'm assuming that in the caves deck, where you're looking for critical mass of caves, you probably just pick up one of these.
Yeah.
And then maybe if
It's
you're
the sort of thing.
self-milling.
It's actually pretty good because it's either just an untapped colorless cave, or if you have a cave with a cool ability, you can just copy it.
Yeah.
And
it just has to make it to your yard somehow.
Yeah, which a lot of them do. They sacrifice, right, to discover. So it's like kind of like a late game extra bit of value. But for the most part, I think Echoing Deeps is just build around C. Are you in the caves deck? C for caves.
Check or no. Yeah. And then wheel it, by the way. Last card is Sunken Citadel. It is also a cave. It is also rare. It enters Sunken Citadel enters a battlefield tapped. And as it enters, you choose a color. It taps to add 1 mana of the chosen color, or it taps to add 2 mana of the chosen color, but you can spend this mana only to activate abilities of land sources.
This card's actually pretty good in the caves deck because it activates your like discover caves for 1 less mana basically, and it's obviously a cave itself. So plus it's also just a 5-color land. So I overall actually think this card is pretty sweet for that deck. But I guess any deck that wants Evolving Wilds, this is also that.
It is. You can just pick and it is nice because you can pick the color based on what might be coming out of your library or what you already have in your hand. Probably we'll see these on the battlefield. It's a little bit of a shame that it's so versatile just because the Caves deck probably really wants this, but it's just going to get sniped by people being like, might as well just take a little mana fixing, pick 6 or pick 7 or something. I'd give it like a C though. I mean, this isn't like an important card outside of the Caves deck. In the Caves deck, I think you just take anything that says cave on it.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, well, that's it. That is every single rare and mythic rare. Man, I'm really impressed by those 3 mana cards. Those are the ones that really stood out because they're rare, not mythic, and they're so easy to cast. You know, when you're like, oh, there's a cycle of gods in this set, it's like, okay, well, those are going to be awesome, right?
Yeah.
But when you find these like 2 and a black, you know, and the thing is like one of the best cards, if not the best card in your whole deck, that's impressive. Like those are heavy hitters for their mana cost for sure.
Yeah, and I think that you're going to have a lot of games where your opponent plays one of those on turn 3, and it's just going to be tough to win that game. But you hope you're going to be the person on that side because these cards, most of all of them, I think breaches or I guess really all of them. But I was just thinking of the black one, the 2/4 that when it attacks makes a 1/1
with Death Touch. Yep,
that card's awesome. I was just thinking of that, or the green 3/4 map maker, or the 3/3 first striker in red that does a bunch of value stuff. So these cards are just really good.
That turns one of their guys into a treasure. I mean, come on, like these are insane cards. Anyway, lots of great stuff in this set, and also critically some really cool builder rounds to aim for. I definitely want to make that 7/7 off the mill card. That's kind of my number one target right now. And I also like the big dinosaurs. I'm kind of a sucker for those too. So lots of cool stuff to aim for. And we'll just have to hope that the format cooperates. We'll find out starting today and moving forward. Next week, we'll be talking to you about our impressions and giving you a bit of a format overview after we've had the set in our hands for a little while. That's going to do it for this one. If you want to find us on social media, I'm Marshall_LR and Luis is LSV. You can find every episode of the podcast, including the Common and Uncommon review that we did last week up on lrcast.com. And of course,
this time with the whole show.
Yeah, with everything hearable on it as well. Yeah, we had a little audio issue there, but I got it sorted fairly quickly, but very annoying. At any rate, hopefully this one does a little bit better. And then, of course, on YouTube and everywhere else, we want to thank our patrons for supporting us over on patreon.com/limited resources. And we want to thank Ultimate Guard for supporting us as well. If you need any supplies, sleeves, deck boxes, any of that kind of stuff, Ultimate Guard is the best in the business, and we highly recommend them. Thank you for your sponsorship, Ultimate Guard. That's going to do it for this one. We'll see you next week.
All right, Marshall, we got to shape up. I want to let folks know that we've actually scheduled this in advance. 1 week from today, on the 21st, we've got the Limited Resources versus Lords of Limited showdown. And at one point, we had a 5 showdown lead. We were up like 7-2, and now I think we have a 1 showdown lead. I believe that they have narrowed the gap. We've destroyed the last couple showdowns, and I think that we're done with that. I think for Ixalan, we're going to be doing some good studying. We're going to be ready to go, and we're going to defeat the Lords this time. What do you think about our chances?
Well, I just want to keep getting the checks that the lords have been spending me to punt it all away.
Oh, that's what it is.
Yeah. So I have a little bit of a different motivation than you do.
So here's why I have a good feeling about this. One, we're having this early enough in the format that the fact that they have a greater stamina for the format is less of an issue. Like those guys, in the first 2 weeks, I think we all draft a lot. Week 7, they're drafting more than we are.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's
because we moved to Vintage Cube. I mean, let's face it.
Yeah, I mean that is part of it. The other is that this is a trinkety set with a lot of little artifacts and resource management, and I love those kinds of set. I get really into that sort of thing, and that's the sort of thing BK is into, even though he doesn't necessarily spend the most time jamming. And BK is back in Denver for the holidays here, so he off from work. So I kind of feel like this is the time. I think he's gotten tired of getting beaten up, and I think he's ready to take revenge. So, if the lords have made it this far in this podcast, then we're coming for you. We rested on our laurels long enough. You've gotten too close. It's time to widen the gap once again.